Thank you, everybody, for joining the October 16th, 2023 meeting of the Town of Richmond Select Board. We are at the welcome and public comment phase of the meeting, and I would like to take care of an item of business before I turn it over to members of the public. Richmond Racial Equity has asked me to repeat something that people may have seen on Front Porch Forum. On Wednesday, October 25th, which is a week from this Wednesday, at 7 p.m. at the Richmond Congregational Church, they will be hosting a forum on policing. They're calling it a public safety forum, and Police Chief Anthony Cambridge and Town Manager Josh Arneson will be there to hear comments and questions from our citizens, and to share any information that they may be interested in sharing. So again, if you're listening or watching at home or here in the room, please make a note. Wednesday, October 25th at 7 p.m. at the church. I intend to be there, and I hope many people here present will also be there. Okay, more public comment. Denise?
Are we on the agenda, or do we want to?
Which, extending the thing to the round church?
Oh, we are on the agenda. Yeah.
Okay, so that's on the agenda. Anything anybody wants to share that's not relating to an agenda item? Okay, seeing none. Are there any additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda? Seeing none. Oh, I do. I'm so sorry. Please go ahead.
Can I request that you move item L to be behind F? So before G, so it goes, the ARPA stuff is E, F, and then L. All three ARPA pieces are together.
I don't see any reason not to. Is there any objection from anybody on the board?
No,
I was actually expecting, Kara, that you were going to ask for item J to be moved to the very top.
What was J again, Jeff?
The frog crossing signs.
Jeff and I agree that that can stay where it is, right, Jeff?
Yes. You don't like frogs?
I'm sorry, for those watching at home, we have an item requesting the money to put frog crossing signs on Cochrane Road, and it's a perfectly valid thing. It's just one of the more unusual agenda items. I've looked down to the agenda and seen frog crossing signs, but okay. So seeing no objection, we will move item L between F and G. Okay, very good. That makes sense. Okay, our first agenda item is an update on our radar speed feedback signs. There is an item in your packet if you should care to look at it, or Josh can bring it up on the big screen, telling us what the status of our various radar speed signs is. Some of them, as people probably know, are not fully working, and so the update would be on what's going on with that.
Yeah, so as we know, this has sort of been a thorn in our side for about a year now, as far as signs that work sometimes, don't work other times. Various people have inspected them. Yeah. Various people have looked into them to try to figure out, can we make them work?
Just click on the plus.
Oh, sorry, I was. So I asked Assistant to Town Manager Duncan Wardwell to try to at least get our arms around it so we can know, what's the manufacturer, who do we call, how can we try to get some headway on getting these things fixed. So he's at least created an inventory. We're starting to try to get in touch with some of the manufacturers to figure out if signs aren't working, what do we need to do to make them work? Because none of this seems to be like, there's not a technician you call that just comes and does these things. So that's what we're trying to figure out, like what's the best way to get these things done. And we also, as we look at this, there's two blinking lights up at the school entrance on either side of the entrance to the school. So we're trying to get it. I've seen it blinking at like Saturday at 9 in the morning, but not at 7:30 as I'm driving my kids to school on a Tuesday. So we're trying to get a little more information on, well, what's the rhyme or reason to why that blinks and when does it blink? So again, another little bit of a sort of discovery process. Duncan, do you have anything more to add on this summary and where we're at now?
No, I think you hit it pretty well. Likewise, I can answer any questions on any of the specifics.
Okay, Jeff.
Duncan, you may want to check with Chief Cambridge. One of the things that he's told me is that this Heinsberg signs can download data via Bluetooth, which is a whole lot easier than spending an hour or a day worth of 8 hours trying to download the data. So you just might want to check with them what kind they have and whether there's any possibility of Bluetooth downloading of data of any of these.
Yes, I believe the ones on Cochrane Road do have the Bluetooth ability. They've got the symbol in there, but I don't know if we've got the transmitter for that. I know, Jay, you looked at one by my house on 2944 Cochrane Road, the one on by River Road or Dugway Road is, sorry, not Dugway Road, but out by the Jonesville Bridge also has that control on it. But I don't know the system for downloading and how that works or what our equipment is. I don't have the police equipment.
The manual that we have for these signs, the manual I got passed to me from Ben Herrick is basically a thick stack of photocopied pages. And I don't recall that it mentioned the Bluetooth, but then again, I may be forgetting, but that would be helpful. But because to Jeff's point, downloading the data is something that needs to be done regularly or the units fill up. And once the units fill up, they're not recording any more data. But if you take the data unit out, take it home and plug it in, it can take easily 8 hours to download the data. It's a very slow serial connection. That obviously would be shorter if you were doing it like every 2 weeks. There'd be less data to download. But if it can be done via Bluetooth, you would still presumably have to drive your car there and sit next to it. But if it comes over Bluetooth and it's just, like that would be much better. So it's certainly something.
Chief Cambridge said that to me too. The process he described, what they do in Heinsberg, is way quicker. They did what you just said. They drive up close to it. You sit there maybe a minute or two, and then you're out of there.
Okay, Bard.
So 2 comments. The first one is pretty straightforward. When we say need ladder and the traffic safety thing, it would appear to me between our highway department, our town staff, and our contracted Heinsberg police staff, we could motivate ourselves to find a ladder and traffic control to get into these places. We've been talking, by my recollection, for like 9 months.
Yeah, I've gotten into that one, and I'm a tall guy, and the step ladder I have, I was still craning.
So
I'm
I
wondering.
understand.
What I'm wondering is, could we just weld rungs to the pole that's there?
Well, where I'm going is, if we
I know, I'm
talk
not
about
kidding.
it for 9 months and we're still talking about we don't have a ladder, that is a problem in my perspective. We need not a description of the problem, but a solution, either a bigger ladder or the highway and fire. We need, like, it seems like not an insurmountable problem to find a ladder and traffic control to safely access these. That's item 1. Item 2, from the description here, I'm struck that if these were cars, we would have turned them in under the lemon law. This is just a problem. How we buy devices that don't work, and the notes for warranty or service, I find, if that were a car, I'd be calling the home office of the manufacturer, and the consumer product, the consumer, complaint division. Like, this is just a problem that I think even a ladder is an interim thing, but it doesn't solve the rest of the problem that I see here. And I think we need a better solution.
You're right, Bard. It's also like traffic control. Like, I'm not even comfortable opening up the display by my house because a car could go by. You really need lights, you need cones, you need flagging. If something were to go wrong, that would not look good. And I think it's also a function of several years these haven't been working. And it's we have a lot of loose strings due to our, just police situation.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, Carol, please go ahead.
Carol Bounty, and I've been asking you guys about this all summer long. And a couple of recommendations on your inventory. You should have data purchase and amount purchased for, so that you know how much you're asking for a refund for. The ones that you bought at the beginning of the summer to put up, I think all should be returned. The desire to collect the data is all well and good, but they haven't worked all summer long. They have not worked for months on end.
Mhm.
So the data that might be there becomes useless because now you're next year later.
Right.
So my recommendation is return every single one that you bought within the last year or two. Get your money back because they haven't worked consistently for 3 months following putting them up. If you don't have any data,
Well,
then that's the facts.
but I think, Duncan, I think the two newest ones, I see them here, have been working. There's a need to reset. So I think there's some nuance to all of these from what you were explaining to me, that every now and again they need to be reset. And I don't know if that's a standard operating procedure or what's going on, but I've seen those ones working. Duncan, maybe you have more info on like.
Yeah, no, I think
New ones.
right. It's each one's a little different, and each one's got a little different contact, and it eats up a lot of time. That it's not as easy as it looks on the surface. I will definitely say that. Much like a lot of things at our town offices, you pull one string, and a lot of other strings fall apart. So it's a trickier one there. Yeah. So like 5 and 6 on the list there, they're working. It's just like I wouldn't be able to even access 5 to get to that panel because there's such a huge erosion drop off, and I don't know how would you get even something across that. I think there's a lot of other issues that are certainly within the way of getting anything done with this quickly and fast like we would want it to.
Well, this is Jay. I would support returning them if that's possible. I'd like to see the original contracts, when were they purchased? What does the contract say? I would imagine, Duncan, correct me. The column on the far right says notes for warranty or service, but there's very little in the right-hand column that says, are these still supported under warranty? Have we checked the warranty?
No, I have not seen any of the original purchasing of these. That's just another thing. This is what I would have to dig into more.
Okay. The other option would be, have we looked around for contractors who, and we shouldn't have to do this freaking thing should work, but have we looked around for contractors that as their business maintain this kind of thing?
Yes,
I
so there is a main company that is servicing one of ours that we need to disassemble, the one on 2944 Cochrane Road. Spent a lot of time trying to reinstall that. You have too, Jay. You know what that one's about. And I wouldn't even begin to know how to remove that unit to ship it off somewhere. So as you call around, you got to get someone from Maine, and they're trying to coordinate that.
Ultimately, if these things are working this poorly, I don't like putting money down a rabbit hole and saying fix them. They should work or they should be sent back. Kara?
Jay, and the ones on Cochrane Road, the end Cochrane Road down to the Jonesville Bridge are not working. They have not been working.
I've reset it a couple times and it works for about a day and then stops.
Correct. So you should not have to reset something on a daily basis. And we should really watch where we put them in the future. Let's go Bluetooth if we're going to do it. Let's make sure they work. And if they don't work, let's not do them because it's a waste of tax dollars.
Jeff?
One of the biggest differences we have right now than we had when we purchased these is we actually have a functional police department with a functional chief who has experience with these signs. And I think it would be good for Duncan to work with Chief Cambridge to figure out whether or not these should be fixed and what kinds of equipment, if we do buy these kinds of equipment, which ones we should get.
Okay. Bert?
Josh, you meet weekly or bi-weekly with department heads?
Every 2 weeks.
So if you meet bi-weekly, is police, highway, and fire represented?
Yep.
Could we ask that at your next bi-weekly meeting, you approach them and Duncan and say, can you come up with a plan
Yeah,
to get into these boxes?
so I think part of it, and Duncan, you can jump in, is like, we need to know what we need to do in each of these boxes when we get there. And it seems like each one kind of has its own nuance, and some of it is a quick reset. Others of it is, we got to disassemble it and take it back. So I think once we know, we got to go up there and do this, it wouldn't be hard to say, hey, Pete, when can we stop traffic for 10 minutes and do what we need to do? But Pete, Duncan, is that a fair assessment, that it's sort of trying to figure out what needs to be done in each of these?
Right. No, it's not only what needs to be done, it's coordinating all those moving parts, which once again, everyone else is very busy. This is often, once again, well outside what I'm having to work in a given week and having to use hours to do that. So it's one of those things of where do you fit it in? How do you coordinate it? It is a management issue as much as it is a technological issue. And once again, just finding the history of all of those is that this is what we've inherited, and I think they're working in some places, but it's obviously not a perfect match. And I don't know how I would necessarily coordinate that just by myself, to be honest with you, because there's all the different moving pieces, and how do we kind of go and say, do we make a day of it? It would be probably good for other people to see, hey, what does this look like? Because who is originally trained to do that? Whose department is it? Is it a police thing? Is it a highway thing? Is it a town manager thing?
Okay, so Duncan, thank you for everything you just shared. I'm going to ask that Duncan and Josh continue to follow up on this, and then I'm going to call in Denise, and then I'd like to move to the next agenda item. Denise?
Denise Barnard, I guess my question is, how often do they need to be downloaded?
I would say every 2 weeks, but I'd like to defer to Chief Cambridge because he's actually doing it.
Okay, and then number two, Dan Noyes rents, like, I think it's called a boom truck. We could rent it for a day, half a day, once every 2 weeks, if that's going to be more safe,
Right.
and get them up there, be safe. And then number three, I'm not thrilled about paying $100 to our chief for him to figure out how these lights work. He charges, if I'm correct, $100 per hour. Do we really want to be spending 100 plus the other person he's working with to try to fix these? Just a question.
I think these are all good points.
My only response is if the chief were a full-time employee, including wages and benefits, it's not that distant cost of a fully employed chief.
Okay. So Josh and Duncan, please continue to follow up on these. Obviously, this is a topic that many people present and many who are not feel strongly about. I definitely endorse the calling the manufacturer to question in sending them back if they cannot be made to work. They should not be something that you look at them cross-eyed and they stop. Let's go on to the next.
Well, yeah, and keep in mind, they're not going to want to hear about a refund warranty. They're going to do everything to do. Hey, we're going to check it. We're going to work on it. So we work on that, but it's always going through those other hoops to get there.
Okay. And Angela, go ahead, and then we really need to move on.
Mine's a simple question. If it takes this much manpower and this much resource just to get the data, who's going to spend the hours and the resources analyzing the data for any data-driven decision-making you might do?
That is something that we are actually talking to our IT firm, Simple Route, and we're also talking to an entity that makes this that will also be working with us on the police stop, arrest, and incident data. So we are working on a solution to that to make all this available via a publicly available dashboard.
No, thank you.
Okay. Our next agenda item pertains to the post-flood cleaning of the town center and Volunteers Green restroom. As people probably know, the flood really basically all but destroyed the restroom building inside, and it needs significant work. We put this out to bid. We got 2 bids, one from Service Master for approximately $36,000 and one from 4 Smart Pro LLC. 4 Smart Pro LLC was awarded the bid, but then unusually they came back and said, actually, based on an increase in wages and materials between when they submitted the bid and now, they really need to charge $11,000. It's not very often I see somebody coming back and say, well, we know we bid this much, but we want this much. Our memo basically sums up that we have a few choices. 1, try to legally hold them to their submitted price. And they could just say, well, then we withdraw our bid. 2, reject the price increase and go with Service Master. 3, reject the price increase and just flat out go out to bid. Or 4, accept the price increase. Accepting the price increase, is not an option any of us. It sets a precedent we don't like. But on the other hand, if we went out to rebid, 4 Smart Pro could say, well, we will bid now for $20,000 because we know what Service Master came in at. So we're looking at there's really no good option. So the question to the board is, what do you think we should do?
Jay, do their bids say a term that the bid is good for? Usually all bidders say, it's good for 30 days. Excuse me.
I don't think that they had that.
Okay.
David,
So Kara, the bid was 7,123.
I apologize. I should have said that.
Then they said 11,000.
It went from 7 to 11, it's not 11 on top, I just wanna make sure.
Right.
And it's for the cleaning of the basement of the town center as well as the restrooms. This is
Right.
combined of both.
So my question is, what's the time crunch here? I know the bathrooms at the volunteers green need to be prepared to store for winter. Is this something that we were hoping, needing to get done before the bathrooms are converted for the winter storage? And what's the timeline like on the town center cleanup? Do we have an idea of when this should or has to be done by?
I mean, I'd say town center probably, I wish it was done already, honestly, but because that's like active sort of silt and such in the basement. I'd like to get out of there, potential mold issues. With the restroom, it's vacant. I mean, but it would be nice to get it done at some point this winter so that it's clean and ready to go by the springtime when we open back up. I mean, we're about to shut the park down in a couple of weeks anyway.
So I imagine the contractors that do this type of work are gonna be a lot hungrier next spring than they are now. Just a thought.
Yeah. It'd just be nice that by, April 1st, when the weather's nice and people are back in the park, we've got restrooms open rather than just trying to continue to go through the porta potties.
Lisa, you seem to,
What's that?
you were pursing your lips. I thought you would have something to,
It's how we think.
oh, okay.
No, I was just trying to think of a bunch of things.
Bart?
I am a little daunted by the precedent of saying 70 and then there's 11, but then having also faced similar things in both large scale and small scale, like somebody says, I'm gonna bid on my estimate for putting windows in your house is 10,000, then they go, well, the prices went up, it's now 13,000. That kind of circumstance is happening all around us as we speak between wages and supplies. So while I'm not enthusiastic about an increase after the bid process, I'm also not overly dismayed by it, given the circumstances we find ourselves in. We've been talking about hiring. We can't hire people. We can't fill our positions. Just the act of doing another RFP and bid, I'm just going to point out the buried or stranded costs of things like that quickly gets to $500 or $1,000. And we're talking, what, like $3,500 or something here? So I'd be inclined to proceed with the higher rate just to get it done and move forward and look at it in the rear view mirror as opposed to the windshield.
Let's offer them half. If they ask for it, see if they take it.
Well, that is an option to make that offer.
Let's do it verbally. I think it'll be quick, but we need them to understand that, we don't just bend over.
That's why we bid on things.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeff?
One of the things that I did, when we had this, I think it was 2 weeks ago that we were presented with this, is I called the references on for Smart Pro LLC. And they got glowing references for both the work that they did and the honesty and integrity of the people with there. I would be inclined to agree with Bart on this, that we're not talking about a lot of money, and we're talking about a lot less money than service. It's $25,000 less than Service Pro. So it's not, to me, I agree. I'm a little uncomfortable with the precedent. I don't think I would make a regular practice of this, but in light of being able to get this done now for what I would consider a reasonable cost, I think we should go ahead.
Okay, well, whatever option people want, we do not have a draft motion in the memo, but you can make a motion. We have a comment. I'm sorry. Josh's head is blocking.
That's okay. Can I just ask a question? Last spring, when I was down there, I couldn't even use the bathrooms. They had a portalet out there, which is still out there now. And I guess my question is, why is the portalet out there if we're using the bathrooms? And why is there a portalet as well?
Are
We're
we?
not using the
We're not
bathrooms.
using that.
Bathrooms are, need to be cleaned and repaired.
They're a
But
wreck.
no, this was prior to the flood.
Was it?
This was
Wow.
prior to the flood.
When was there?
COVID time period, I think, too, and I don't know when they got removed.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
and the bathrooms were locked and,
Hmm.
um,
I'm trying to remember this spring.
I don't normally hang around
They
that.
got over
during, during baseball
this spring,
last year.
last year. I don't recall from the earlier part of this spring, it was,
But I mean, do we have them open on a regular basis?
we usually do, yes,
Okay.
yes, absolutely, and I can't remember why last year if the porta potty was open. And I don't recall that, I remember during COVID, yes, we had some things going on there.
And Denise, as I was just saying over here, I don't normally hang around public bathrooms, but, I'll take your word for it. It may have been a COVID thing that we just didn't discontinue. Kara,
Oh, wait, you know what? I thought it was probably, we might have not been ready to turn the water on. Sometimes they're not ready to turn the water on, but
Early enough,
but
okay.
it's still cold overnight. We don't want the water to freeze. But we're starting out with the park being open, baseball might even be starting. So we'll put a porta potty in for a few weeks just to get through those.
No,
I think that's,
personally
sorry,
think,
that's probably why it had like a temporary
Yeah.
spot. And then during COVID, we had one out during the winter because we thought there was gonna be increased usage. So,
I didn't know if it was because it was handicap accessible. And I
no,
don't remember if the bathrooms are handicap
that's a good
accessible.
question. They may not be.
Lisa, thank you very much for trying to save the taxpayer dollars, but I agree with Jeff on this one. Whoa,
Whoa,
You guys-
whoa.
and Mark,
that's like 2 meetings in a row.
it's important for us, yes, you have done this before, so I don't think you're setting precedent, just to let you know, with engineers, water tanks, all these different kind of things, they've come back and said, we need more money, you didn't charge you enough in the bid, blah, 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 and you just add on. I think that happened with the Andrews Forest stuff, with some kind of survey up there, so don't worry about precedent. Okay, that being said, in today's day and age, if we have somebody that can come in and do it for 20,000 less than somebody else, but they need a little bit more money to do it, because they're having problems with staff turnover, I say, please make the motion to do the full 11. Let them know that this is a one-time situation. They're not coming back until, again, if they get the work done now rather than in the future.
Does anyone, Jeff?
So I move that we move forward with Smart Pro LLC for a cleaning contract for the town center and what is that, the recreation
And the restrooms.
direct bathroom
For
for
the
$11,000.
for $11,000.
No second.
Okay, we have a motion from Jeff Forward, seconded by Lisa Miller, to agree to meet the $11,000 increased price from For Smart Pro LLC. Is there any further discussion?
Just a question for Josh. Was the scope of work pretty clearly laid out? Okay,
Yes.
so it wouldn't make sense to revisit expectations. It was all pretty clear.
It was
that-
very
okay.
clear. Duncan did a nice job with the RFP.
And the schedule, thank you, that's clear too. That's
Are we going to have to replace, is part of this replacing drywall in the bathrooms?
I think it's just removing and cleaning. We'll have to go back in and replace drywall, replace any fixtures in there as well.
Yeah, the price, after the flood, the local price of drywall may have gone up considerably.
It did.
Yeah.
But this is more just for the cleaning of it, and then it's gonna be, we're gonna need someone to.
Oh, so this is not even for replacing. This is
This
really
is
just
Just
the
to get
clean.
it all clean, we're gonna put the drywall back in, we'll have to look at all the sensors for the plumbing fixtures to get put back in, there's probably electrical work, we'll have to have double check, but first thing is, let's get it cleaned and then figure out the other pieces after.
Will we do that? Use a green drywall? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can.
Mold resistant.
I don't know, that could be a good idea too.
Ceiling.
No drywall.
There's very little drywall in there, but I agree, if there's another option, let's do that. Plywood would probably work just fine.
Or cinder blocks, yeah.
Well, there's most,
Damp wall.
90% of it is cinder blocks. There's just a little closet in the concession stand area
Yes.
that has a little bit of drywall around it.
Clearly, I should be spending more time in these bathrooms. I
There's
know.
a concession stand there too. Little League does sell candy and hot dogs in the spring. There's
So you have a reason to hang out, candy and hot dogs.
candy and hot dogs.
Right. Okay. Is there any further discussion or are we ready for a vote? Okay, you've heard the motion is to accept the $11,000 increase and go with For Smart Pro LLC.
The increase to
It
11.
increased to 11,000. Thank you. Appreciate that. Please state your name and your vote.
Jeff, I.
Lisa, I.
David, I.
Art, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, I thank you for that. The next is revisiting the topic that we originally talked about. I believe this was at last meeting, the budget meeting,
It was,
regarding approval of the 2024 insurance plans for town staff. Terry Martineau from Hickok and Boardman was with us.
he's here again.
She's here again. I keep looking for your name, but you've got your camera on, so you're harder to spot. So she is here again tonight. For those who were not present or subsequently viewed the budget meeting, the town offers a platinum plan, a gold plan, and currently contributes. The town pays 90% of the premium plan, 100% of a gold plan. The employee pays obviously 10% of the platinum plan. We've taken bids from, and we've got information from MVP and Blue Cross. MVP is still cheaper, although their prices have gone up by 12.8%. There were questions last week if we could get a lower premium by adjusting piecemeal co-insurances, co-pays, deductibles. And what we were told, and Terry, feel free to jump in and correct me if I'm saying this wrong. Given the size that we're below 50 employees, we're basically picking items as like off a cafeteria line, the benefit off the shelf. And so we don't have the ability to tailor it to that extent. Now, there were some very good questions last week at the budget meeting about the contribution percentage. Now, right now, as I said, the town is paying 100% of the gold and silver, but right now, if I recall correctly, we're down to one employee who will be on the gold plan, Connie?
No, we have 3 single employees on the high deductible gold plan. And then the rest are on the platinum plan, but I think we only have 1 family plan right now.
Okay, that was what I'm thinking of. Okay,
Jay, can I ask a question?
sure.
Would you mind letting us know how much a family plan is and how much a
Right.
single plan is?
Right, that's what we're about to get to.
Okay.
So we have in the packet, there are 2 sets of numbers I want to show. One of them, because it's a question that came up last time, is how do we compare to other towns? Are other towns predominantly supporting this at like 80%, 70%, et cetera? And we got some numbers back from VLCT and from our surrounding towns. If you would show first the VLCT statewide numbers.
Sure. These are,
Well, there was a summarized one.
PLCT.
Was it not? Was that?
The summarized one was from the compensation.
It's in the memo.
Sorry.
No, it's not in the memo.
Well,
Is it in the- was-
I think we could pause here though.
Okay, go ahead.
So employer health plan contributions at these percentages, do we know if this refers to platinum, silver, gold, bronze, all of the above?
So it's, you have to kind of so you'd have to look and say, okay, here's Addison Town. And then it's in 2 separate charts, unfortunately. So you'd have to scroll back up to Addison Town and see that they offer Blue Cross Gold.
So they're 100%, but at gold.
But it gold, yeah. And I'm sorry, like if this was in Excel format, I would have cross-referenced some of this for you guys,
Yeah.
but this is a giant PDF that they sent.
And so my only point, thinking about the nuance of this, and I'm gonna leave aside other forms of compensation, that what's difficult in the summary form, the nuances of health insurance, who knew health insurance could be so complicated, right? That the percentages of contributions have a
there we
different
go.
value depending on whether it's platinum,
Mhm.
silver, platinum, gold, silver, bronze. And so that's where I have trouble making sense of a summary table that says 100% or 90% or 85%. When the details perhaps matter.
Right, the details do matter. Josh is bringing up the chart that I was originally trying to
This one,
find.
I think, is what he's in.
Right.
Yeah.
It is in the memo. I was just failing to page up far enough. Now this is, these numbers come from, this is a summary Connie put together from the VLCT data. As you can see, whatever plans they offer, the mode is 100%. But the vast majority of towns contribute at least 90%. Bart?
But this is sort of speaks to my point.
Right,
If it's 100% at
Oh.
bronze,
right.
that's more or less money than 90% at platinum.
That's right.
So
I
I haven't,
Can tell you. I'm sorry,
ahead.
excuse me for interrupting. This is Terry from Hickok and Boardman. I can tell you that the municipalities that I work with are not offering bronze. They are offering platinum and gold plans.
How many does she work with?
How many, we have a question. How many municipalities do you work with? Well-
Excuse me, thank you. I personally, I work with the smaller towns, so I work with towns that have, say, 25 and fewer employees, and I would say I have, 15 or so towns that I work with. Not a huge number of people, but I can tell you that having worked in the municipality sort of environment for a number of years and worked with Blue Cross Blue Shield as well with the municipalities, it's always been just like really good coverage.
so can I ask a follow-up question then?
Mhm.
So Terry, of your 15 towns, are they all 100% premium at platinum level?
No, not 100%, but definitely between 100 and say 95%, maybe 90%, between 90 and 100% premium. Some offer HRAs and cover, deductibles, some don't. That's another whole story. But for premium, yeah, between 90 and 100% for sure.
Thank you.
Okay,
Jay,
yes, I'm sorry.
is there any data for counties, countywide, like Chittenden County?
This is number 2.
And my second question, Jay, or the board, is there any option, if an employee's spouse has insurance, do they opt out and do we give them a bonus?
Yes,
Okay, Jeff?
yes. For a family plan, we give 5,000. For a single, it's 2,500 for opt-out. I really, once again, appreciate the work that went into our compensation study. Because like countywide, we're not comparable to Burlington or South Burlington or Colchester or Essex or Williston. We don't have a lot in common with them. And so what we did with the compensation study is we cherry picked the towns that had much more in common with us. We came up with what, a dozen different towns or so?
More than that.
Maybe
Is
more.
that data available for
So that's,
viewing?
that's this here, if you wanted to look at it.
Right.
But you wanted to go somewhere.
No,
different.
this is
Is this
fine.
Okay.
Because you'll notice this is not statewide. These are comparables. So you notice that we're going out as far as Northfield and Morristown because they're more comparable to us. We do have Burlington down toward the bottom as a point of reference though.
But so the way the compensation study was set up is, there were a number of different fields. And on each field, how close was it to what we were, population, I don't know, there were like a dozen different categories and they came up with a score for each town. And then we chose the towns that were most like us, the highest score that was most like us. And so to me, this is a much more relevant chart than the previous
Statewide, right?
the statewide one. And what I get out of this is, if you take the top 10, the 10% contribution, 90% for platinum I feel more comfortable looking at this than I did than when we did 2 weeks ago. And I'm feeling more comfortable with that. I'm really reluctant to change the type of plan because that's just a whole ball of wax.
Right.
That's for the users too. So learning.
Connie has her hand up. I'm going to call on her because this is probably relevant. Connie?
So Interestingly enough, the data that I was given from VLCT was from the 2022 manual because that's all that I had. And then this morning I got the catalog for 2023. And part of the reason why I don't like relying on the VLCT data is because not all towns have to participate. And what I found as I compared 22 to 23 was that there was about 50 towns that did not participate in the 2022. But as I look at them all, I'm seeing the same trend where the bigger percentage is leaning towards the 100% coverage. A couple of them changed by like, went from 84% to 86%. I have no idea why. But the data was pretty much the same as, if we look at it from a percentage perspective, as it was for 2022. The other part is in how the survey is filled out for VLCT. And if you look at those charts where the VLCT percentages were, you're going to see a lot of boxes that are empty. So like they may say 100% of the single plan and then nothing of the others. And maybe we can find an example. So for example, Alberg pays 100% of the individual and then 100% of two adults, but they must not have anybody on the other two categories. So we have no idea what they pay. And a lot of towns.
I was just going to say, Connie, I work with several of the towns on your list here, and Alberg does pay 100%. I work with Underhill and Alberg, and I'm trying to think who else. East Montpelier might be of your relative size, Stowe. And I can tell you, they are all paying between 90 and 100% for sure on all tiers.
So what I'm saying is in regard to the VLCT chart, I think the only reason those boxes are blank is they may not have any employees in those categories.
Here. Yeah.
So that may be an issue of VLCT wording their survey a little differently, saying, if you had people in all these categories, what would you be paying? So the VLCT data just isn't that reliable, in my opinion.
Okay, so Bart has a question, and then I want to bring up some different data. But first, Bart.
My question for this chart, can everybody, Connie, Terry, can you see this chart now with a selection of towns? Just same page. I think all understand what platinum means. What does HGHP mean?
That means high deductible health plans. So those are plans that are federally qualified to be coupled with a health savings account. Richmond does offer one of those plans. One, two.
Yep. The gold, silver. Those are the second and third options.
Yeah. So
the gold. Yep.
Those are like, that gets more nuanced because it's not just the plan. It's, is there an HSA on top of that? What's perhaps most meaningful here are the platinum plans that are most directly comparable to our baseline, what we pay for currently.
Correct.
Okay, could you bring up document C3C2? Denise asked what the prices actually are. This document was prepared by Hickok and Boardman, and Terry, the document has Blue Cross Blue Shield on the left, MVP on the right. On the far right, the savings over MVP, but then something that I personally am not completely clear on. We have standard plans and non-standard plans. Can you tell us what's going on there?
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a great question. So way back in the day, it feels like it's been a long, long time now, but when the Affordable Care Act came about, Obamacare is how it all kind of started, if those names ring a bell for you. When it was determined that we had the Affordable Care Act, part of the legislation was that carriers would need to come up with two separate styles of plans, I'll say. There's a set of standard plans and then a set of non-standard plans. The thing with the standard plans is they have to look exactly the same as far as benefit level is concerned. Co-pays, co-insurance, out-of-pocket exposure has to be exactly the same on all of all the standard plans from carrier to carrier to carrier within a state. In Vermont, we have two carriers, MVP and Blue Cross Blue Shield. So all of the platinum, standard platinum through bronze plans look exactly the same with Blue Cross and Blue Shield as far as the benefits go and the plan structure goes. What can be different about them is clear here, and that would be the monthly premium and the provider network. So in this case, you know, what we're showing here for 2024 is within the standard plans, the Blue Cross Blue Shield rates are higher, not a ton, but are higher than the MVP plans for 2024. The non-standard plans also have to include what's considered the 10 essential health benefits, which it's exactly what you think they'd be, you know, office visits coverage and hospital and prescription drugs and ambulance rides, that kind of stuff. But with the non-standard plans, the legislature said that carriers can differentiate themselves from each other by tweaking those plans in some way. In the state of Vermont, that's been done around wellness. MVP offers a $600 well-being program. Blue Cross Blue Shield does not on their non-standard plans. So Richmond offers Platinum is a standard plan. The Gold High Deductible is a non-standard plan. So anybody covered under the Gold High Deductible health plan with MVP does have the opportunity to earn $600 in well-being benefits. But that's kind of off the subject here. My point being is with those plans, some of those plans, depending on the plan we're talking about, the rate is a little higher. You know, they're a little more squiggly.
Okay,
So it
the
really
rate-
depends on the plan that you're in.
I apologize. So this is the 2024
I'm
rate. So
sorry.
these are not what we're currently paying, but let me just make sure I have this straight. So I've put a blue squiggly. I'm terrible at drawing squigglies apparently, but the platinum rates there, top row, MVP column, that's what we would be paying for each of those contract types, correct? That's the right row?
Correct. Yep, and that matches up with the side-by-side comparison that I prepared as well.
Okay, and then down below the gold plan, under non-standard. So for example, a single
That would be
member-
the Gold High Deductible.
So 944.14, for example, for a
This is the one we.
947.82. Okay, thank you very much.
Right. Thank you,
those are the
Josh.
two-
Yeah.
And silver we offer, but no one is currently opting into, I believe. Is that right, Connie?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, so the two functioning plans are the one that Josh just highlighted and the one that I kind of inexpertly tried to highlight.
Exactly.
Other
Yep.
local context, and Josh, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, if I recollect correctly, and I think I do. The current police collective bargaining agreement has the same plans, but at a 90%, 10% premium split.
Which is the same as the town, yes.
Which is the same as what?
The same as all the other non-unionized employees.
Okay.
I bring it up
Yeah.
because that was collectively bargained to sort of get to from 0% to 10%. There is other language in that collective bargaining agreement that says if health insurance premiums go up by more than 10%, that element could be renegotiated. And they went up by 12.8%. And I point that out because there was some recognition in collective bargaining negotiations that the cost increase of health insurance might lead to renegotiation of that benefit due to cost of the taxpayer. And do with that what you will. I just bring it up as looking forward of a year and a half, 2 years ago.
So can I just ask one other question? Do our employees pay 10%
Yes.
regardless of what plan they have?
10% for platinum.
Not for, so because gold, so the way we structure it, because gold is lower than platinum.
10% for platinum, 0% for gold.
Right.
That's right.
So I just want to give, the premiums are lower for gold and silver. So they get full coverage on that, and then they get a contribution to the health savings account, and the difference between that coverage and 90% of platinum. So the town is paying the same amount, whether you're on platinum or gold. It's just if you're on gold, you get some money with HSA.
Karen,
So just a couple things, because we can't see it on this screen, if this is the case. What is this? Is this pay period? Is this monthly? What is there's a rate. I don't think that's your annual
Monthly.
amount.
It's a
This is
monthly.
monthly.
We can't see, that's all I was just asking.
Yeah, that header is
Oh,
hidden.
sorry. No, it doesn't say, but.
Actually, it doesn't say, but
it
this
is
is
monthly.
monthly.
Okay, so that's just.
No, that's not what this slide was intended for, no, but I do have a side by side that does indicate it's a monthly.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that everybody sees this as monthly, because that might be a shock to them. Just a quick question on is Cigna too big uninsured? It's for much bigger companies then, because you said Blue Cross Blue Shield, MVP, there's Cigna. Is it because Richmond's too small to get a Cigna?
Yes, that's exactly correct. That's a great question. Cigna used to provide small group, what's called small group fully insured plans and rates. They pulled out of that market a couple of years ago. They actually offered it sort of on their own, and then they offered it through the Vermont Association of Chamber Executives. And now if you have fewer than say 25, so they only are offering what's called level funded and self-insured. So level funded is a partially self-insured type of funding for rating reasons. And they will only look at an entity that has at least 25 employees enrolled.
Thank you. I had one more. That was just, I want to make sure, because if people have Cigna in our community, I want to make sure they realize why they do.
Absolutely. Yes. No, it's just the town of Richmond is just doesn't have enough enrollment.
So the last point I want to make, and it goes to the compensation review study that Jeff has talked about. I just want to bring to your attention that we are looking at percentages of other towns, what they're paying for the healthcare of their employees, but we don't know what percentage they're at their compensation level. They could be at a 50% compensation level while we're in the 70th percentile. So that's why they're paying 100%. And we're talking about now having our employees pay some. And I think you guys weighed that. And that's why you put in the 10% originally, is because you knew you were moving their compensation up. So all I had asked at the budget meeting was that you consider going to maybe 11% to help negate that healthcare cost increase. That was all.
Okay, Jeff.
So, there was a point of agreement that Kara and I had at our last meeting, and I think I've landed on this. I would be reluctant to lower the percentage of employee contribution, and I'd equally be reluctant to hire it at this point. So this year, we're paying 90% of the platinum, higher than gold. It's the premium plan, health insurance. And I'm frankly reluctant to change that at this point.
Okay.
So,
would you like to go ahead and make the motion?
I would
Can I ask
like to
one
make a motion and then we can
Then we'll
discuss it.
discuss it.
Okay. So I move to offer MVP Platinum Plan with 90% of the premiums paid by the town and 10% by the employee, and to also offer the MVP Gold 3 and Silver 2 high deductible healthcare plans, with the town paying 100% of the deductible and contributing to a health savings account in an amount equal to the difference between, what is it, 90% of the platinum premium and the full premium of the Gold 3 or Silver 2.
Okay, do we have a second?
This is David, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Jeff, seconded by David Sander, to set the platinum plan to 90% town, 10% employee, and to offer the Gold 3 and Silver 2 high deductible plans where the town would pay 100% and contribute to a health savings account, the amount equal to the difference between 90% of platinum and the full premium of Gold 3 or Silver 2. Now, before we go to Denise, comment from the board, Bard.
Yeah, so I'm frankly wrestling with this. So health insurance continues to go up double digits, 12.8%. And just doing, if I do the math, if employees paid 1% more for their roughly $3,200 a month of coverage, it would be about $32 a month. And it's a burden if you're making federal minimum wage. It's a burden to some families who are at the lower wage scale. But I contemplate, is that fair or unfair compared to the rest of our citizens, where it would appear to me many of them are paying a higher percentage than our employees. And so that's just why I contemplate moving potentially in a direction other than the status quo, like to 11%, something in the direction where it shares that. And I would say I'm open to considering offsets of compensation because total compensation includes both wage and other benefits such as health insurance. It is theoretically possible for the cost of family health insurance to be comparable to somebody's wage.
That is
They're not
correct,
working
yes.
full time.
Mhm.
It's just a tough one. And I think we should go into it with eyes open. This is the cost of health insurance is nothing like it was when I started my career being covered by health insurance. It has grown in leaps and bounds and shows the threat of overcoming our economy in some way.
Yeah.
But I'm really thoughtful and reluctant about, what do we do about the cost of health insurance?
David? Well, you were looking like you had all sorts of thoughts. Do you want to, we have a proposal in a second to go to 10%. We have somebody saying he'd like to maybe consider 11.
Yeah, I mean, there's compromise all around. There's no easy answer here. I'm wrestling with like.
David, could you speak up a little bit? I'm sorry.
There's compromise all around. I'm wrestling with this one. There's no easy answer.
Jeff?
So, my understanding is that we need to land on this relatively soon.
Yes.
And I share your ambivalence about whether it would be worth doing a little bit higher. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted to delay this, so we had a chance to think about it for at least a couple of weeks. My understanding in looking at the budget is that, this won't put a strain on our budget. That our budget, we will have enough money in our budget and still keep an increase below 5%. I'm thinking that that's the case. I'm not confident, not positive about it, but in looking over the budget numbers, I'm thinking that we have enough to do this. And so where I'm at the moment, I'd be happy to delay it. And I would table this motion if we don't have consensus right now. But I think I'm ready to make a decision.
Okay, I'm gonna ask Connie to just calculate a number for me, and then I'm gonna call in Bard. Connie, this may be because we're not paying the 2024 rates yet. Could you guesstimate what the actual savings would be if we did 10% versus 11%? What if you look back at 2020 at the previous fiscal year's numbers? How much of a savings would that have been? Bard?
I'm just going to point out that we're now talking about moving into a 25 budget, right?
Right.
So we don't have a budget for 25. We're talking about a budget for 25.
Right.
And for me, the context is not like, oh, as a vacancy savings, could we afford it? I think it goes to a broader policy about health insurance comparability with our citizens, what's reasonable to charge people for health insurance. Because absent a budget, as we build a budget, arguably virtually anything we can fit into the budget. It's really what are the merits of that specific expense. And in this case, as we raise people's wages through a couple of vehicles, what's reasonable to ask them to, as employees, to copay for a premium, what is a significant part of their total compensation. Also,
Okay, Connie, do you have that ballpark?
Not off the top of my head right now. I don't have all the rates in front of me.
Would be a lot.
It wouldn't be that much. I mean, we're looking at,
I'm sorry, Jay, if you could repeat your question, maybe I can quickly do that for you.
How many
so
thousands?
Terry, we
Go
would
ahead.
have 4 2-person plans, 1 single and 1 family on platinum. So it'd be 1% of each of those.
but would it not, Connie, have a ripple effect if we're matching platinum and the other approaches? Wouldn't it ripple into the other folks as well? So essentially,
It would, yeah. And we're seeing that with just the nature of the change this year, where you would actually see your gold high deductible people are going to go up in HSA contributions because the gap has widened between the platinum and the gold.
But the amount the town pays is gonna be 90 or 89% of platinum for every person that's on it.
So it's 1% of platinum would be the.
1% of platinum is a number to figure out. What does that mean when, if,
Everyone.
across everybody? Yeah. Looks like Terry's crunching that number maybe.
I'm trying, I'm doing it manually right now, but.
Would it,
Actually, you know what I can do?
would it make a difference, if we included the language that we have in the collective bargaining agreement about increases in health insurance cost over 10%?
No,
If you're asking me, no, because we already hit it and it would bring us back to the table to talk about what we're talking about.
yeah, and you revisit it for the town every October anyway. It's not like it's bargained for the next 3 years, so it's already happening.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Would it make a difference to table this? My understanding is we have Connie has to include this in the December pay scale.
I would prefer not to table this and go ahead and vote. But I'm curious. Terry is crunching the numbers, and I think that
I am, yep, give me 1 second.
I asked the question while she's crunching.
okay. Denise, go ahead.
I totally agree. And Jeff, I don't understand I don't know if you understood what Bard was saying. It's what the rest of the town also pays. For instance, and I'm just gonna tell you this, Mike's retired from UPS. We have they subsidize at 50% for retirement. Mike and I pay $1,630 a month. That's what the two of us pay. It's taken right out of his pension, $1,630 a month. So Kendra and I were just doing some math. If someone's on a single plan, to their benefit, and we're just talking health insurance, it's an additional $6.31 to their benefit package. Per hour, if they work 40 hours a week. I'm not sure, do all our employees work 40?
No.
So for 40 hours, it's $6.31 additional benefit. And I mean, I don't know, do the teachers, and Jeff, I don't remember when I was on the board, I don't know if you do either, or you remember what Patty paid? Was it 20% the teachers pay?
It was just under that. I think it was 18.
Okay, Angela.
Well, it's not.
Yes, Bart, I want to commend you for the nature of your questions and what's sparking your concern, and say that you're spot on with your thought process on this. What is the community doing, and what is a reasonable expectation of the town employees? But I did want to ask Jay, is there a dollar amount that you're looking for with this delta that you're asking Terry and Connie to try to come up with? I mean, I guess what I'm asking, Jay, is what was the purpose of the delta in your decision in this process?
The purpose of the delta, when we say let's compare that, let's save some money, let's go to 11%. If that delta were to be, I don't know, I'm just going to pick a number out of a clear blue sky, $2,300 total. I'm just making that number completely up. We then have to say, is it worth that extra $2,300 to potentially annoy our employees by nickel and diming and saying we want 1 more percent? I'm not saying 1 more percent is onerous at all. I could certainly vote for that. It's just kind of a question of what actually what's the return on doing this? Connie?
So I'm hoping Terry and I come up with the same amount. I'm coming up with a total just on the platinum folks, $1,550 for the year. Total
For the year.
at that
Okay.
1% difference.
Okay, so I was generous. So if that number is ballpark correct, by going from 10% to 11%, we're saving $1,500, give or take. Jeff?
So this comes up a lot. That's comparing public employees' wages and benefits compared to the private sector, whatever they are. And there are sacrifices to being a public employee. You know, no matter whether you work for the state or the school district or the town, there's sacrifices that you make. Oftentimes it's a wage sacrifice. And how the public sector makes up the difference of it, at least partially makes up the difference of that, is in benefits and more with healthcare. You know, because healthcare has gone crazy. This country is crazy on healthcare anyways. None of us should be paying this. It should be, you know, it should be, we should all be on Medicare. However, we aren't. And so I think about comparing public employees against public employees rather than public employees against private, because that's really apples and oranges. It's not the same. So again, I go back to the compensation study, which was relatively objective. We tweaked it, but it's relatively objective. It compares like towns to like towns. And at the time, we were concerned about hiring, staff, and retention, recruitment and retention. And in order to do that, I think we are generous. I think our town pays a generous wage relative to other towns, and we're still struggling with recruitment. But I think that we are an attractive place to work. We're an attractive place because of the work environment and the work, the type of town that we are. And we're attractive because of our benefits. So I'm gonna stand with my motion, and if it fails, then I'm willing to consider another one.
Okay, I'm gonna chime in for a second. One point that I'd like to make has to do with our employees. We just, when was it, last week? Held an employee appreciation event out here by the library to thank our employees for the incredible service that they put in during the flood. I mean, it's not that they went unpaid, but the point that they were getting up at midnight and going to work, we all know what they did. They did it conscientiously. They did a quality job. They went above and beyond, and they deserve that employee recognition event. I would hate to have to replace any member of the highway department, just as an example. I mean, those are talented gentlemen. They work very hard. I think they deserve every penny they get. And consequently, I don't want to say we're being over generous, because I don't think we are. I think our employees deserve the compensation they're getting, but that's just my 2 cents. As I already said, I could vote for 10%. I could vote for 11%. It sounds to me that going to 11% would be more symbolic, to be totally honest, than anything else, because the amount of money to our taxpayers, $1,500 is real money. Okay, $1,500 is real money. It may be a tiny percentage of our unassigned funds, but it is still real money. So I don't just blithely say, who cares? Because every penny that we spend has to come from the taxpayers or from grants. But in this, yeah, which comes from the taxpayers. In this case, though, I think it's worth it. But that's just my 2 cents. Angela?
As a public school employee, I am paying 20% of my healthcare premiums. And that dollar amount is, it's not as easily negotiated in a 3-year contract with our compensation packages. It really is dictated by these conversations that you guys are having right now. When Hickok and Boardman is telling you that it's going to be a 12-point-something% increase for this year's premiums over the previous years, and that you actually have a mechanism in the contract with your town employees that if it exceeds 10%, that the percent contributions could be revisited. I just want to encourage you guys, you put these mechanisms in place for a reason, and then you might choose not to even use those mechanisms. Then why should they have been in the contract to begin with? That's my first point. And Jay, you are absolutely correct. If you are perseverating over the equivalent of $11,000 worth of additional healthcare payment that I will, as a property taxpayer, be incurring, I'd like you to put this type of lens to all the other line items in the budget. I appreciate this type of conversation that we're having. I completely see what Bart is saying. Jay, thank you for your point. And Jeff, I just want to tell you that just because you have a certain amount of money in unassigned and unallocated reserves doesn't mean you should just go ahead and spend it next year. That's the end of my comment.
Okay, Bard.
My hopefully final comment for all y'all. It's when I think of the comparables, it's not like Global Foundries or the local law firm. I tend to think of other towns, state government. There is some semblance of county government with those folks think. And frankly, from my world, the private nonprofits. So they are quasi-governmental, and in a lot of states, there's fewer private nonprofits and more state county employees, especially county municipal employees doing some of that work. And I don't know, you know, what I understand some of the benchmarks from some of those, frankly, fairly large private nonprofits. People are paying more money with higher deductibles for those employees who are not making a ton of money, like designated agencies. Are paying more for their health insurance and are not making a lot of money at an hourly wage, and are often working nights, weekends because somebody else didn't show up and somebody's got to show up.
Or they're on call.
Or they're on call. Example sitting next to me. So there are people who pay substantially more, is my only point, in other perhaps more comparable organizations.
Okay, Barn, I would like to make a suggestion. Just to give us a chance to vote on both. Would you like to make an amendment to make it 11% and then see if that passes?
Yeah, I don't have a strong feeling. I could, you know,
Would you prefer 11%?
but we have one on the table.
I know, but I'm asking if you want to try amending that.
I would have to agree to it.
So you two should.
Right, so do we want to do a trial balloon of 11, or do we want to vote on the 10, and if that fails, go to something else?
We could try that. You know, motion for a friendly amendment to change the percentage from 10 to 11.
So I would not be offended if my motion failed. But I think I would like to let it stand.
Okay,
I think, frankly, because I think it's less confusing.
okay.
That's fair.
Just wanted to put that out there because we're tossing around options, but then not actually. So
I frankly, I appreciate being able to have this debate. I think it's informative to me, and I probably make lots of enemies out of it, but you know, it's useful to me, so I appreciate it.
well, I think though, Angela made a good point regarding the entire budget. It's very easy sometimes when we're on a select board or any other budgeting agency to regard the numbers we push around with, you know, yardsticks as monopoly money, but it is real money that came from somewhere. And it's something that I'm not chiding anybody. I'm not pointing a finger and saying any of you would do this. It's just something to remember that, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, these dollars came from somewhere. And so we always want to do our best to husband them.
You know, and I'll try not to take offense at that, but I do look at every number.
Oh, I'm not saying you don't.
And I'm not trying to frivolously spend taxpayer dollars. What I am trying to do is, I think right now, keeping the status quo of what we have in this fiscal year going forward makes sense to me, and it's not going to break the bank.
No, and that was kind of my point about the Delta.
Yes.
It's not a huge amount of money, but we should be asking hard questions sometimes. And that's what I think. We've had a good discussion here tonight, and I think we could probably move on to a vote if we're ready. Is there any further discussion?
No.
Okay. So, Terry, thank you very much for your number crunching. Connie, thank you for yours. Please state your name and your vote.
This is Jeff, I.
Lisa, aye.
David, I.
Bart, no.
Jay, I. Okay,
No offense.
Can I make one comment
please do.
for the employees? And you may already do this, but I would love to see when they have their annual salary, maybe something in their paycheck once a year, what their annual salary is. what their hourly benefit is for life, health insurance, and if there's any, what's their hourly benefit for their vacation, so that it's all push. I mean, UPS used to do this and it was,
My employer does it.
and it's incredible. It's so educational, and it's educational for that employee too. Cause I just think it should be a must once a year.
You're right. When most people look at that, they go, wow.
Yeah.
I would suggest not hourly, but I would suggest monthly, and the school district does that as my.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they salaried or they hourly?
Yeah.
We know it that way.
So
But I
Used to once a year go through the total compensation package, hourly wage benefits.
yeah, it's incredible when you break it down, medical, dental, vision,
Yeah.
you know, sick days, it's,
immerse, yeah, everything.
Potentially help with your retention too, if somebody's.
and it makes
I
them
agree
more
with that.
valued.
We did that when I was on the school board, is that we changed the pay stub so that all those things were listed, so people did understand that their
Yeah.
total compensation.
Okay. I've been reminded that we do have other things on the agenda. Okay, our next item on the agenda is.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to excuse myself. Enjoy the rest of your meeting. Bye-bye.
Okay, our next item on the agenda has to do with two financial policies that have been being worked on by Connie. Lisa has had some input, well, we've all had input. A fund balance policy and a reserve fund policy. It'd be a very high level overview. Our fund balance policy. And our reserve fund policy. The reserve funds are not the same thing as unassigned funds. We here on the select board frequently screw up and use the phrase reserve as though it's interchangeable with unassigned, but it's not. Reserve funds are pockets of money that have been set aside for specific purposes and that have to be spent for that purpose. For example, the tennis fund. We actually have a tennis fund. It has about $150 in it, and it can only be spent on tennis. And when the money is gone, it's gone.
Yep.
And so, but that is different from the fund balance policy. How much as a minimum do we want to retain in terms of unassigned and restricted funds? Now, what's the difference between those? We have really two pots of unassigned funds. Unassigned funds are money we did not spend. We could have budgeted it to buy a new forklift. And then when we wound up not buying the forklift because we got a used one much cheaper elsewhere, the money that we budgeted wasn't spent would go into unassigned. But using that example, if that was a highway department item, it would go into restricted unassigned, meaning money that has to be restricted unassigned has to be spent on the highway department. All other unassigned can be spent in a more general sense. So at a very high level, I'm going to shut up in a second and let Josh and Connie speak to this in more detail. We have had a number being tossed around out there of 15% of that our goal would be to have 15% of that year's budget set aside as don't dig into that. If you want to use the term rainy day fund, you can. But to basically have that term as reserve. So if our budget is $1 million, which it's not, we would make sure to keep $150,000 back in restricted and $150,000 back in unassigned. So that's the topic before us tonight. Connie and Josh, okay, please correct me. How did I get it wrong?
If you don't mind,
Please do.
Carla Bounty.
It's when you're talking about your funds and your 15%, it's you need 15% of funds available to you for your cash flow. You don't need a rainy day fund with 15%. You need to carry balances that total up to 15% of your budget to have accessible for your cash flow purposes.
Okay, that's true.
Okay, so I didn't want anybody to think it's now a new fund that's the rainy day fund. It's the cumulative total of accounts that total up to be a maximum. Your auditor said this years ago, a maximum of 15%, not a minimum.
Are you including all the reserve funds in that 15%? So like,
Distinction between,
That's a very good question that I've asked for
it
years.
sounds like you're including,
That's a very
all the
good
totals of
question.
the
That's a
reserve
very
funds.
good question that I've asked for years is, do your reserves count as part of the calculation? And I have never had an answer to
Okay,
that
so
question.
let's address that. So Kara is absolutely right. The term rainy day fund is something I'm not comfortable using because it's not really that. In the memo, it's mentioned that this is to facilitate cash flow, but also in case of emergency spending. It's foolish to spend down till you've got dust and moth in your pocket, as it were. So Connie, I'm gonna, as I said, shut up and have you talk about this. When you're calculating the 15% and saying the corresponding dollar amounts, is that including the dollars that are in the reserve funds?
No.
Okay.
The unassigned and the restricted unassigned comes from revenues above what we budgeted or expenses below what we budgeted. And that's done each year, and the auditors put that in the financial reports after they pull everything together and they say, this is your total for the year. It has nothing to do with the reserves that we have raised in the budget to go to specific reserves for specific purposes.
And that makes sense to me, a non-accountant, because if you set aside $5 million to buy 2 dump trucks, and you calculate and you say this is part of the big total, and then we're going to keep 15% back of that, that's, you're not touching that $5 million anyway. That $5 million is kind of off the table. It should be in terms of the overall discretionary budget, but that's just my 2 cents. I don't know for sure.
Can I follow up on that, Jay? Just
Go
make sure I
ahead.
understand. So I just want to make sure, and this is just questions that are getting answered to shed light on everything. So when you buy that dozer and you're taking it out of your capital reserves, does it go through your budget at all? Or are your capital reserve spending and your expenses that you're doing your capital reserve purchases of stay in an external budget?
I want to say
So,
that's true, but
Starting last year, because Connie, you're shaking me off already. So Guild one.
So if you look at, so we did change how we were doing things, and we used to pay for some capital items out of the budget, and we shifted gears last year. So as you look at the fiscal year 24 budget or the 25, you will see that we are contributing to the capital reserve. And then we also provide a list that shows what items we're paying for out of that reserve this year.
Yeah, I'll share
So
this.
just the question, I'm not, just stay with the question. So the answer to the question is the capital reserve budget and reserve use is in a separate external budget and is not part, nothing's weaved into the current budget, like no one line item or no one piece of how you use a reserve and expense a reserve is not in the current budget.
So we used to put it into the budget as like, maybe it's Sherry. Connie, tell me if this makes sense. If we were going to buy a $50,000 truck with reserves, we would put $50,000 on expenses and then $50,000 on revenue from the fund to pay for that
Through your budget.
through the budget. So we would show that as an expense and as an offsetting revenue. So it wasn't being raised in taxes. We were going to use the capital reserve fund for highway to pay for it. Starting last year, the board said, well, we don't need to put that as an expense and an offset. So we created a separate page that talks about spending out of the reserve funds. And if we're going to, and then we have that $50,000 expense there to show capital highway at 100,000 minus 50 for the truck will leave us with 50.
So you're saying right now, no capital expenses are going through the budget at all.
I didn't say that. I said if we're using an offset directly, right? Connie, am I I don't want to get pigeonholed into like saying yes to that and then say, oh, well, there is this capital expense in there. I know if we had a direct offset, we took that out of the budget now. I without looking at the budget, I can't say if there's a
And
capital.
the only
expense
reason
there
I'm
or not.
trying to bring this to your attention is when you talk about 15%, you need to know what you're talking about 15% of. Are you talking about your budget that has capital reserve spending and expenditures in it? With like, you're going to buy $100,000 piece of equipment, you're going to take only 50 out of your reserves and you're going to tax the taxpayer another 50,000. And then we're going to set aside 15% because when your reserves build up, let's say your reserve build up to $50 million. You mean that isn't available for you for your cash flow for like your emergency repair of a culvert out of your culvert and bridge fund? You mean those reserves aren't set aside for emergencies as well as capital purchases? I think you need to
No.
understand your funds.
Connie,
So no, those we can, when we vote on a budget and we're putting money into reserves, We're voting on the reason for what that money is for. So no, if say we want to, this year we budget $100,000 to go into the highway capital budget. And that's going towards the purchase of an excavator in 3 years. That is what we have to use that for. We can't use it for an emergency. I will say there are some capital expenditures that are in the budget. I think of the fire department, for example, that has an equipment line. And by definition for the town of Richmond, capital expenditures are items that are more, or services that are more than $5,000. So we do have in the fire department's equipment line right now, we have several items that are over $5,000. You will see them on the capital plan, but they will not be paid for with the capital reserve, which the capital plan will also show. These items are on there, they're being paid with tax dollars this year. However, the portion going into the fire department's capital reserve has specific purposes for within the next 5 years to pay for the rescue truck, I believe is the next big one. Those are completely separate than unassigned and restricted funds. What the auditors are recommending is that we maintain, not raise, but maintain 15% of the next operational budget or budget to include capital reserves, the expenses, 15% of that amount. And they're suggesting that because if everything went wrong, they want to be able to see some guidelines are 15%, some are 2 months worth of your budget. They want you to be able to have 2 months of your budget hanging out to cover your expenses if whatever goes wrong. Your money and your reserves have already been voted on for specific purposes. The unassigned and restricted funds have not.
Bring up the unassigned policy. I'm going to ask Josh to bring up the unassigned policy. Both of these policies are things we need to ratify or reject or just not approve, right?
Well, so the unassigned fund, we're looking for some feedback so that the stuff in yellow, when we get feedback from the board, we'll make this update. It'll come back for an approval. The reserve fund, I think, is more straightforward because it's essentially a description of reserve funds.
So this one is the one genuinely we are looking for our feedback. The portions in yellow are the portions that you're most interested in feedback on, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is really the percentage.
Okay, so what you're seeing here is to maintain sufficient cash flow for working capital and emergency expenditures. We will maintain and I'll note the word there, minimum. Kara has said that it should be a maximum, but the way it's currently drafted says minimum. 15% of the general fund budget should be available as unassigned funds. 15% of the highway budget should be restricted funds. That should be kept back. And at the very bottom, if you will, when the combined restricted and unassigned fund balance drops below 15%, so the two together drops below 15%, the town will only use restricted and unassigned funds for emergency purposes until the balance is replenished. Now, before we go to the audience, select board members, questions, comments, concerns about what you see here. Jeff?
A couple of things. In a previous meeting, Connie, I think you recommended 18% as opposed to 15%. Is there a distinction between these two?
No, I'm just saying over the years, we've had different recommendations, even from the same auditing firm, where one maybe Josh remembers, but like one person from Sullivan and Powers said 15 to 20, the other said 18 to 23 or 24%. But the recommendations I'm seeing across the country, and I believe it's from the GFOA, is 15%.
Okay, David, as a former select board chair, do you have a point of view on this?
At least 15.
You could go higher, but 15 is the minimum. Bard?
I think as written as possible, it strikes me that this is what the fund balance uses are what we've been doing in perhaps more of an ad hoc way in recent years, saying, well, if we have excess money, let's use it to offset next year's. It's like last year's excess revenue. offsets next year's expenses.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we're operating this year.
Right.
So that seems plausible to me, and 15% seems plausible.
Okay, I'm keeping going down the table. Lisa.
Well, Connie and I kind of wrote these together, but I learned a lot from her, so what I wrote is all I know.
Okay, but you have you have no objections to 15%.
Not at all.
Okay, Jeff.
We debated, we really did,
So
so.
I have a couple of language questions on the previous page. There's a sentence about the assigned funds. Is it this one? Yeah.
Yes, right there.
The second sentence there. This constraint is imposed by the budget voted on by the town's residents to apply prior year unassigned fund balances to the upcoming fiscal year. I'm not sure I understand what that means in this context.
This year, we're taking last year's and putting it toward next.
So that's assigned, that describes what we are doing this year's, this year for last year's balance for next year's budget.
In order to get to the 15%.
To me, like, if it goes over 15%, drop back down.
Right.
Okay. And further down under unassigned funds, it says, in the second sentence there, it says unassigned funds are available for any purpose approved by the select board and the voters. How do the voters get involved in that? You know, like we make
budget.
But if we then say mid-year, oh, we need to buy 10,000 more pounds of gravel.
Yeah, I would say that you wouldn't want to have a townwide special meeting for that kind of vote.
The and should be an or.
That makes
It could be at a town meeting. I can see that, and they always have the right to do that anyway.
So, but you think the and should be or, so it's the select board
Or
saying,
and or.
we have an emergency, we got to spend this money,
Would
or
be
the
better.
voters can say, this is in the budget, we
Yeah,
approve.
so, yes, I think or would be
Because
better
there's too
because
many
it's not.
possibilities.
and/or.
Yeah,
I think and or would be appropriate. Okay, any other questions or language concerns?
No, if everyone's comfortable with 15%, I can live with that.
Okay, so just to clarify, this document, we're not making a motion on, we're basically saying, do we have any objections or changes? We're going to talk about the reserve funds in just a second, but I just would kind of like to get closure on this. So Karen.
Thank you. I have asked you guys to do this for years, so please don't think I'm against you creating this policy. I'm 100% behind it. There's just some organizational things that you have going on with the document to make it more easily read and more easily understood. Like in your header, can you go up to your header? I'm going to show you some things and you guys can either clean it up and reorganize it if you choose to or not. But in the header, it talks about non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. So usually if you're going to list those down and define them, you either keep them in the same order you've listed up top, or you put them in alphabetical order so you can read them at the top and read them down through the list the same way. That's just an organizational thing. But my question comes into, you've got this list of funds here, which I think it's 4 or 5. I'm not sure now if you roll down, Josh, Troy, but that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know if you had 5 across the top, but anyhow, you've got 5, 1, 2, 3,
Right, same.
4, 5. Beautiful. These 5 funds, though, you talk about 5 types of funds, but then if you roll down to your usable fund types, there's only 2. So these 5 funds have to feed into one of these 2 types that you haven't defined which one the 5s are up there. Okay, so that's all I want you to clean up and clarify if that's possible. And then if you roll down to your organizational thing again, is when you roll down to your targets, you've got your 2 targets as unassigned and restricted. They should be in the same order underneath it. So whatever order you're putting up there should go in the whole thing flows and people can connect dots. The couple of points I wanted to make is when the auditors have reported back to you anywhere from 15 to 20, it was below 15 and 15 was the top range. It was a range from such and such to such and such. That means the top range was the max, not the minimum. It's the maximum that you should consider. Because what these unassigned funds are that you guys have accumulated, and we'll go to the chart in a minute because I think you should show it. The taxpayer should know that we're not at 15%. We went from 35% to 55%. We're at 55% right now, based on the chart that you posted out there. That is astronomical. That is not okay. That is talk about issues for people who are trying to be in affordable housing. You are setting aside money with no intention purposes of either putting it into your reserves for a major purchase or giving us a service that you're taxing us for. And when I came to the budget meeting and talked to you guys and said, you can't do a full budget of your police department, that's why. You just increased this by 20%. That's a huge increase when the auditors say your max should be 15%. And if you're sitting on a lot of reserves that you can pull from in case of emergencies, then you should be a maximum of 15% for your cash flow purposes. I have other tweaks in here that need to be, talked about, because up in your restricted area, you say it's only for highway. I think your restricted area here, I know you've highlighted it for the highlight budget. It should state right away, highlight budget, so that nobody looks at restricted and says anything else other than it's just for highway and everything follows. But underneath your unassigned, you don't even list your assigned option as up top as being able to use in the unassigned area. That's what I thought you were going to point out, Jeff. I thought we were going to agree. So I've just got some tweaks that I think could really clean this up. If you guys are open to that, because in the bottom, you talk about, let's talk about the replenishment. And I think you talk about capital reserves, right? Somewhere here, right there in line 2, I think, offset the next general or highway budget expenses, including contributions to capital reserves with a specified purpose. So you're going to move this money. You've already asked taxpayers to approve capital reserve and all of that kind of stuff in a separate budget. And you're going to move this to capital reserves randomly. And we're not going to tie this whole thing into a capital reserve then policy. I think you need to watch and tread very carefully here. You're sitting at 55%. I really think you as a town have the ability to instantly borrow money in a case of emergency that you were going to overspend that 15% and could not draw out of your reserves.
Okay. Kara, I appreciate all the comments. We don't have to finalize this tonight. If you have more tweaks you'd like to make, I would appreciate if you could perhaps email them to the board.
If you're okay with that, because like the fund balances and types of
Can I ask you a
uses.
question?
Yeah, sure.
Could you get a copy of this and mark it up? Because
Yeah, that would be-
100%. If you guys,
I have no objection to that at all. Sure.
You guys, Josh, could you send me the Word document and I'll redline it back to you?
Thanks.
I really support you guys doing this though. I really do want to. And I want to make sure in your unassigned and the purpose of your unassigned, is there anything else that you can think of that should be there? I think the assigned, the thing that you set up top that you can roll it to another budget year should be built. Those 5 things up top should have a home down here and what kind of fund they are.
Okay,
Jay, can I ask one question?
please do.
Should it, and since we're gonna be editing the document, should it say maximum 15%? Because I think the auditors are gonna be so thrilled that you have this and that you are doing 15%. I think that they're gonna be thrilled after so many years prior, we have not done 15%. So I don't know. And that's just a question. Should it say maximum?
That's why they say something to you.
Okay, I'd like to go to the board on that. What do you think, Bird?
Here, what I
Jay?
say or ask as a process suggestion is that people's suggestions, edits go to Connie and Lisa for the next version, and that we don't perhaps continue to wordsmith here tonight.
Okay. Connie?
So to be clear, maintain a minimum of is exactly what it should be. The auditors want us to maintain a minimum of 15% of our operational budget to have on hand. What we can add in is not to exceed a maximum of, but they want to see at least a minimum so that towns have what they need in the case of an emergency. And as far as offset the next general or highway budget expense line, yes, that's exactly what we're doing, but we don't have to specify each item. So we could say, for example, in fiscal year 24, we are offsetting the highway budget by $500,000 with restricted funds. We haven't broken it down saying it's for this expense line and that expense line and the other expense line. We're offsetting their entire budget by that much money and not raising taxes for it.
Okay, real quick before I go to you, Bard, I guess one thing that leaps out to me is if we do say maximum, that would permit a town to put in 3%, which is way too little. And so I think we should. Okay.
Operationally, I don't see how we can follow the policy with a minimum or a maximum of 15%.
Want to expand on that?
Yeah.
We have to hold it at exactly.
Yeah, there's no space
15%.
between them.
Oh, right.
That's a pretty tough target.
We'll never hit it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody meant that.
When I look at unassigned number 2, and at the risk of wordsmithing, offset the next budget expense line, including contributions. So this isn't a hidden purpose. It still has the net effect of reducing tax burden in a future year, whether for planned expenses in the year or capital reserve commitments for that year, right? It really still has the net effect of taking last year's surplus and applying it to offset next year's tax.
Right.
Right. Well, we don't have specific numbers. All we can work with is boundaries. So,
Right.
you know, we just try to stay within the boundaries.
I'll propose some, okay?
So, a process question, so I'm assuming there'll be a revision, and then when will we revisit this? Will it be next meeting?
At the budget next week.
Okay.
Okay. So now let's get the reserve fund policy is in a state where we have what's hoped to be a final draft. I hope you've all had a chance to read this, but Connie, do you want to summarize the really key points here?
It's everything. If you scroll down, I mean, this is what's dictated to us by statute or what the voters have already voted on. Each reserve has a specific purpose. I guess this is just putting into policy what is already part of the financial audit. They spell it out in their audit as to what can be done with each reserve, how it is restricted.
Jeff?
So I'm afraid I had a
Wow.
number of questions relative to these specific funds. You brought up the tennis fund, Jay. Is there a document somewhere that says that $350 can only be spent on building a tennis court that's going to cost $100,000? Is that what this says? Is there a document somewhere that?
So some of these do have documents, some of them don't have documents, unfortunately. I think having the policy will help us define that, but Connie, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe there's a tennis fund document.
No, I mean, a lot of these happened before my time here. Some of them we were able to dig up data to support it. Some statutes we were able to look up, but beyond that, all I had was looking at the audit reports going back many years.
Okay, so my point here is that some of these are listed in our capital reserve, or which document is this? The
Reserve fund.
the reserve fund budget, the spreadsheet of that. Some of it is listed as capital projects, some of it is special revenue funds, some of it is special separate banking accounts. One banking account that I would like to see as a reserve fund that's not listed in the spreadsheet that way is the town center fund. It's the intent of getting revenue from rents is to go towards the town center, and it acts like a reserve fund. We have to vote on every $100 we spend on that. It seems like it should be listed as a reserve fund, and it's not on this particular list. There were, and one of the things that I agree with Kara on is I think we should start spending some of these little reserve fund balances, things like the rec path.
How much is in it? Do anybody know?
Yes, right here. Rec path is at 17.
What dollar amount is the question?
Dollar amount.
Dollar amount. The rec path has, according to the budget, is $1,200. We have a soccer line item. I don't know if it's listed here, but it's a special revenue fund. a soccer line item that has $12,000 in it. That's interesting, you know, so that might be better suited as a, you know, a line item budget for, you know, the rec committee or something, you know? The tree replacement fund has $270 in it. You know, it seemed to make sense to me to spend it and eliminate that fund. So those are changes that I would suggest. I don't know whether we do that tonight or not.
Hey, Bart.
So I think it's such a cornucopia of different things here. The tennis fund, as I recall, there was some effort to raise money for the town to build a tennis court, which at the time, I think I looked up the cost, it was about $50,000 and we raised about $350.
Yeah,
So,
but we do have ARPA money.
so for me, that becomes after, it's probably been a decade or more since that issue was on the table. It seems to me that we either move forward and spend it, or in that case, perhaps give it back to the donor or ask them to change the obligations. It's $360 to just sit there forever, kind of is problematic. I think if I remember correctly, the soccer line item is rec soccer, where it's held, the revenues and expenses are held here. And I thought that's how we paid for all the soccer goals that are down in volunteer green.
So it's actually, it's like recreational soccer, which is a separate organization. Their money is here, which is a very odd setup. I've not fully understand why that, but historically that's been it. So we don't vote on that. They basically submit an invoice for uniforms and pay out of it.
They give us money at the end, the money. So that's
Basically their account.
So that's why this seems like sort of a cornucopia of each one has its own set of issues. So I don't know, like, at what point do we have the will and time to spend on each one of these? Because I think each one is a mini study and with a recommendation about what do we do with it? Do we keep it? Do we spend it? Do we give it back?
So this has a signature line item on it for this particular table. What's the purpose of this table, right? Is this one, are we supposed to sign this one?
Well, so it's part of the policy to better, and Johnny, I'll let you, I was gonna say to define how each, like you said, it talks about each fund, what it's restricted by, how it was set up, what are the source of the funds.
You might put another column on it, like what's the balance?
I
That's gonna,
agree.
but the balance is gonna change like weekly.
So
So like
it's-
this is more of a policy of like, when we have a question, oh, reappraisal, what can we, how is that set up? Oh, it's permanent, it's from state
Could be
sources.
just the 2024 balance, just so that we have.
Well, okay,
As of,
there are two things.
Every
One, a
day.
document we could just have to look at. The other is the policy that's going to be on file for years to come. Policy that's going to be on file for years to come doesn't need to have a moment in time balance. That's just something we want to
And
see.
the audit has a moment in time balance as the end of each fiscal year. So that's a good.
And if we're curious what the current thing is, I mean, we can get that, but that's for us to know. We can share with the public, but should not go into the policy. So, we need a motion if this is otherwise acceptable to accept this. And I hope it wouldn't be held up by the fact that it doesn't show the current balances. Do people feel ready to say, yes, Connie, this is fine? Or are there things you want to see changed in it?
I think approving it with the direction that there are some changes to clarify.
We can always hold off for a week if there are specific changes you want.
No, it would be better if we have one, rather than having none.
Jim?
Make a recommendation, Jim Feinstein on the town treasurer. This is a policy that describes the current funds and their purposes. I recommend that you approve this, and you ask the town treasurer to do the research for recommendations, changes to these funds or to sunset them.
Okay.
The research to make that's a separate process about how you change funds versus documenting what you have.
Okay.
That's exactly what I was gonna say, you know.
One other comment is, did we discuss anything that might be missing from this list?
The town center fund is.
Town
not
center
there.
fund.
So do we want to approve it with that request with the addition of town center fund?
Connie, you've got your hand if you want to comment.
Yeah, I want to talk to the auditors about that because right now it is just listed as a fund, not actually as a reserve. So I want to ask them, can we just change the name or do we have to do that formally? But also I noticed on the date that's on this was from back in August when Lisa and I last looked at it. So that would have to be, just went by it, yeah. So that would have to be changed before it could be signed.
So
You can always bring it back for signature.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, and there's nothing saying that if we find out more information, then we amend it.
okay, so are we looking to vote on it tonight?
Yep.
Okay, we need a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the, was this the restricted fund policy?
Reserve fund.
Reserve fund, okay. Move we approve the reserve fund policy as written, and it will probably be amended.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the reserve fund policy as currently written.
I will second that.
A motion from Lisa Miller, seconded by Bart Hill, to approve the reserve fund policy as currently written. Is there any further discussion?
With amendment.
With amendment.
With the amendment of the town.
With that,
center fund, if it gets
Added.
approved by the auditors. That is that, could that be then?
That's fair.
Is that
Positive.
okay? Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
This is Jeff, I.
Lisa, aye.
David, I.
Art, I.
And Jay, aye.
And
For your work on this.
can we make that formal request to the treasurer to
I think, yeah.
look at these and see which ones can we spend?
Okay,
That would be great.
so I'm gonna do a time check. It is 8:51 p.m. Our agenda at this point says it should be 7:30. It just happens that the topics we had were topics that there was much to speak on. However, I think some of the following items should be able to be gone through much faster. Although again, I would not want to go through them and sacrifice due deliberation on them. Our next item relates to the mandate that we gave to the committee, the Volunteers Green and Browns Court Project Committee, to evaluate what purposes on those two parks ARPA funds could and should be spent. They came back to say, well, we also know that the Round Church Park area has some work, and before we look at that, it's not technically in our mandate. Could you add that, Denise?
Do you mind if Kendra and I come up?
Please do.
Two members of said committee. We have a great committee working hard. It's my fault. I totally forgot that the Old Round Church Park is one of our beautiful 3 parks that we have in the town of Richmond. And it was brought to our attention very quickly that we did not include that park. And when, just to let you know that we did a walkabout, our last meeting, which was last Tuesday. And there's I was shocked. Many sinkholes, trees that need to come down. There are stumps that need to be removed. The monument and the bench need to be cleaned. They've got green mold all over it. And then in certain areas, especially where the bikers unload and change right there on the grass, there's no grass and it needs new topsoil and new seeding. So we are here to ask you if we could include that park as part of the landscape.
Well, first a comment, something was suggested a while ago as a changing booth at that park. So you just think about that. But that said, as Bart, I'd like to move to expand the scope of the Volunteers Green Brown Sport Project Committee to include recommending the use of ARPA funds for possible improvements at the Round Church Green.
Cool.
And thank you for your.
This is David, I'll second.
And I just have a couple other comments, if you don't mind. First, another request. We all have our tasks, and the committee members have all taken incredible work to do research on and bring back. And I'm just wondering, is it possible to have a staff person at our meetings? So when we have questions, we're wasting time, and you gave us such a small window, and we're wasting time because then we have to leave the meeting, go talk to Josh, go talk to Duncan, have them do the research. If there was a staff person there, we could expedite more quickly. We had a woman in from the state on our first meeting that has a great grant out right now, and she's just happens to be a local Richmond resident, which was such a bonus. I don't know if you all saw the governor's press release last week. Another new one came out for recreation. As I see this list for recreation, that's so exciting. So if you could talk about possibly give us a staff person to actually attend our meetings. Thank God she knows how to do Zoom and she's so technology savvy, thank God. And then also, would you as a committee like us to come every 2 weeks and update you with where we're at, what's happening, all that stuff? We're meeting twice a month and like I said, we have an incredible committee. It's wonderful.
Okay. Staff person, I would have to defer to Josh and Duncan.
Yeah,
They will see what we can do.
Okay.
As far as updates, I would like to hear from our committees more as opposed to less. Some committees don't talk to us a lot.
Not every 2 weeks. I mean.
Well,
That's a lot.
Monthly?
but if you have something newsworthy,
Okay, we are in the mix. I mean, it's incredible what we've already done in 2 meetings. But the 2 meetings we've actually met in person, there's so much work that all these people are doing behind the scenes. It's unbelievable. These people are incredible. And I also want to tell you that we had a person from the Recreation Committee at our meeting that joined in our walkabout. We went and visited around church at Volunteers Green and saw everything down there. It became dark too quick. We didn't get to Brown's Court, but we're going to.
Who was it?
It was Mark Fossil.
Okay.
And also, so then one of our board members, Jeannie Agner, reached out to the other woman who's the chair and they have had, and everything gets copied to the entire committee. So we've had incredible back and forth. So we're not reduplicating what they had done. So we're getting all their information as well, because we want to work with them.
Mhm.
And I think Mark was kind of blown away when he came to our first meeting. He's like, whoa, So it's very exciting that we're working with the rec committee as well. And they have a huge say in it as well.
okay,
And we've invited them to every meeting.
okay.
As well as many other groups. We kind of reached out to Farmers Market and
Oh, that's right.
the Richmond Community Band, soccer, baseball, you name it. We tried to
The
reach out.
Richmond, what's the committee?
All kinds of people.
Our
Okay.
senior group.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
They have
so-
been very vocal.
Mhm.
Helen
They-
Hardy Senior Center.
Yeah, not Helen Hardy, the senior center. They have been very vocal and they have been attending our meetings via Zoom and really good comments. And they're kind of acting as the liaisons, I would think, that for Brown's Court.
And a number of the people in the neighborhoods also have called in and gotten there
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's,
as well.
Maybe the most
So-
important, because they got.
Yeah, so
so I fully support, hearing from all of our committees more frequently. We're gonna be here till 11 o'clock tonight with
Right.
3 meetings a month now, because of the budget. I would recommend coming in and
Once a month?
after Thanksgiving. We've got 3 meetings in November as well.
Okay. But still newsworthy stuff. It can be, you can inform us about it and we just don't have to have it as an agenda item, but you can always email us and,
Yeah, and
Okay.
that would be better as well.
yeah.
perfect. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Thank you.
In the interest of time, any further discussion? Seeing none,
Not yet.
please take your name and your vote on adding the Round Church Park area to the mandate of that committee. In addition to Brown's Court Volunteers Green. This motion was made by Bard, seconded by David.
It's Jeff, I.
Listen,
David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, all right. Lori has been sitting over there very patiently for a while.
Thank you for your patience.
Interesting, and some of it even applies to the library.
Okay, so
Previous,
our next agenda item has to do with the library came to the ARPA committee and by extension to the select board, asking for money to match a grant for restoration of the library building, which they did not in fact get, which was depressing
correct.
because I thought it was we really qualified for that grant.
Mhm.
Since they did not get the grant, we did not have anything to match. So Lori, if you'd like to go ahead with your request.
Okay, so, as you said, we didn't get the Bruin grant. However, all the work that still needs to be done on the library is still there and needs to be done. So I put in a request for ARPA funding for $148,000 to do still a portion only of what needs to be done on the library building. But, consulting with the contractor that's been doing the work and with Jay LeBear, who's been our owner's rep working on those projects, we feel like these are the 2 next most important and logical things that need to be done to really preserve the building. I don't know if any of you have been behind the building to see the big hole in the siding where the animals are getting in. I think Alex actually might have put plywood over it just to seal up the hole. But I just wanted to say too, we had a new building assessment from Alex Tolstoy, who's the builder who did the work on the library this summer. And you guys actually approved that $1,000 to use some time on the lift truck. And I don't know if you know that Alex actually used to work for Preservation Trust of Vermont and for the State Division of Historic Preservation. So I really trust that he knows what he's doing in terms of looking at a historic building and trying to come up with the way to best preserve it. So in the memo, we itemized, it would be the rest of the woodwork repairs, both on the upper towers, which is what he inspected from the lift, and then the woodwork repairs on the lower part, mostly siding where it's been damaged, and then painting, which is a big item. And he specified in his report how that should be done, that we're not going to just spray on, that it needs to be scraped. If you look at the building, you'll know why he recommended those things. We also added a 10% contingency. We added about 3 to 5% inflation, recognizing that we're not going to be able to do that work this summer. So we're going to be looking at next summer, and they aren't going to, and contractors aren't holding bids for a whole 6 or 8 months. So we know that that bid might come in higher, as you guys just experienced with the bathrooms. Yeah. And then having an owner's rep to manage this, because our librarian doesn't have the expertise or the time to manage a construction project. And that comes up to the $148,000.
Okay, so I popped up because I know somebody was going to ask for it. This is where the ARPA committee kind of left off its project list. This could be recolored a little bit because we have subsequently voted on some of these things and approved them. Like, for example, we voted on, and I think we've written a check for MMC TV for $10,000. So originally the match for the Bruin grant was going to be $150,000, and we voted to award that. But now, since we didn't get the grant, the total would have been $300,000, the Bruin grant plus our money. And now you're coming back and asking for.
Correct, because we were going to do more.
Okay, so you're
more
asking
of the repair. We had an original bid of $430,000 for all of the work on the library.
Okay, so the net you're asking for this set of repair is, again, repeat the number.
$148,000.
Okay, so in terms of, is there money in the ARPA budget? It's basically a wash. The money that would have been used for the Bruin grant can just be, we can just take a vote and say yes.
Excuse me.
Go ahead. I'm just saying in terms of, do we have the money?
I'm sorry, what you approved for our committee, the 450,000 is not reflected in there. That's correct.
You're right. And that's what I'm saying. It's saying in terms of where the money has already gone, I wanted to show that the 150 was already planned for.
Oh, previous.
You already approved that, but does she need 140 plus the 150 to have the match?
No, this.
You're just saying, can I use?
We did not receive the Bruin grant.
Right.
No, but I thought you were coming to get the other.
She shrank her request.
Oh,
Yes.
got you.
Yes.
Right, and so as it just.
We have another. I will say that we might be coming back for more money. However, the Department of Libraries has $26.4 million in grants that they have not awarded, and that they are supposed to be putting out the applications in the fall, was what I was told.
So like
now. We completed the needs assessment they asked for. It's $10 million they have in the bank, and 16.4 that I do not believe they've gotten yet because of Congress and the budget situation.
Well, but you can count on Congress.
But there were also 88 libraries on the webinar wanting money. So, and the 5 libraries that got flooded during the floods are a big priority, so
Yeah.
I'm not counting on that money.
A couple of things. The town center committee has reviewed this and fully supports this, the work that needs to be done. I have a suggestion on where the money comes from. And if I could share my screen, I could do an updated.
I think you should be able to.
Should I be able to? Okay, let me see if I can do this.
We have the technology.
He previously gave permission to me, and I don't think it was selective, so.
It's just
Am
open
I-
for anybody.
Where am I? Excel, there it is. Okay. So how do I get rid of, there we go. Okay, so, one of the things that's different about the library repairs to how else we have something like 9 or 10 different criteria for how the ARPA committee set up the, how we should be expending ARPA monies. And much of it is about capital improvements and investments. As much as I love the library, and I clearly love the library, and I really strongly feel that this needs to be done, it doesn't really fit in that category well. It's a repair that's going to need to be done again. And I think I mentioned earlier that I really feel that we should have a line item in our reserve budget to that we put money in every year to do this type of repair, because every 10 or 15 years, we're going to have to paint the building, and it's not going to be cheap. So what I would, and the other item, that's the next item on the agenda, is the town center committee has finally been able to get the numbers to put together for a request as well. And that we'll go over that as our next agenda item, but the total amount is $340,000. As Denise was pointing out, we have already assigned the Volunteers Green Committee and allocated $450,000.
Which is not reflected.
Right.
Which is reflected in my last column.
Okay, on the right, okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
his has been updated, so better one to
okay, so
share.
what I wanted to try to put this in context and make it so that it was understandable. What I would suggest is approving the library trustees' request, but approving it by using town center reserve funds. We have something like $250,000 in that fund right now. And so we have enough money to do this work and allocate it towards that project. I'm trying to take into account the $450,000 that we've allocated for the recreation type funding. And I can speak to the $340,000 that the town center committee is recommending at our next agenda item, or earlier if you want.
So I don't know when you want to explain this, but if the ARPA committee originally approved $150,000 for this, if it was Bruin Matching Fund, but now a different committee, the town center committee, says don't approve $150,000, make it come from somewhere else, and put in $340,000 for solar efficiency. That's what the table looks like.
So the original approval was contingent. It was contingent on getting the Bruin grant, which we did not get. So at that point, it went away. Now we could reconvene. I've taken over chair of the ARPA committee, and we haven't met since August. And because we had gone through all of this work, and we have discussed all of these things for the most part at the select board level. We've discussed most of these things at the select board level, and the ARPA committee felt that it was that the next step was for the select board to be making decisions, which we weren't ready to do yet, and that the ARPA committee wouldn't necessarily add value to that. We can meet again if it's so desired, and if you'd like the town center committee to meet relative to this, we can. But we have discussed these projects, and we do support that.
Well, my only follow-up question is then, what's the difference between using town center reserve funds, if we can call them that, and using the ARPA funds? It's sort of switching them back and forth. I don't understand why there's a benefit now of reducing the library exterior from 150 to 0 and shifting as of today,
Mhm.
more money to solar efficiency in the town center. Isn't it arbitrary whether it's town center funds?
Well,
Or ARPA funds?
if you're trying to account for ARPA funds, if we put all of them in the ARPA fund category, there's not enough to cover it all. So that was the, you know, and so that, at some point, there would be competing interest that the select board had to choose between.
Well, could you arbitrarily leave the 150,000 for the room, for the library exterior and reduce the town center solar efficiency by 150 and take the balance of the 340 out of town center reserve? Isn't it kind of the same result?
There would be a similar result. There would be a similar result. It seems like what the town center committee felt about this specific proposal on doing solar and higher efficiency heating and ventilating equipment was that it fit the criteria of the ARPA committee quite well. It was an investment in capital improvements that we might not otherwise make, and it has a return on that investment. It's one of the only things that it is the only thing on the ARPA list that actually meets all of that criteria.
Can I make a comment,
Sure.
please? Okay,
Okay, Esther.
so I
could
have.
talk- I
three-
only talked
I
to Paul
have-
briefly about this.
I have a split. I'm on the town center committee too, so I have kind of a, okay, so I have an ARPA funds process comment, which is I assumed that the ARPA committee was going to get all of the requests by a certain date
Mhm.
and do the work of prioritizing and weighing the purpose of the funds and how it was. Clearly, that's not the process that is happening, because now individual requests are coming to the select board kind of at random. And now we have the problem that I sort of thought was going to happen, which is at the last minute, now everybody has a way to spend money. So that's my first, just a process comment. My second comment is that I'm on, as a member of the town center committee, I do support the fact that we should be doing energy efficiency. However, the 148,000 would be going toward a project that is ready to go as of whenever they can start working on the building next year. The $340,000 solar depends on that won't be spent if we don't have a positive bond vote in March. And so you're kind of weighing a shovel-ready project, as it were, with a may or may not happen project. So I honestly don't care where the money comes from, but the project needs to be done. So I think that's up to you guys to decide where the money comes from. And yeah, okay. Those are my comments.
Okay, Carrie, you've had your hand up long enough. It's probably starved for blood.
And Jay after.
And then Denise after that.
Do you mind if I sit beside you, Lori?
No,
Stay right there. They're good.
no.
Carol Bounty, as an ARPA committee member who have spent over a year of my life participating in the ARPA committee, a couple of corrections to make. The $10,000 on MMCTV was not approved by the ARPA committee. It was actually out of unassigned funds that you actually paid for MMCTV. So there's another $10,000 you need to add back.
Okay, so we can strike that line.
Okay. The other thing is the ARPA committee took 6 months to talk about criteria and procedures and who we would look at and deadline dates and as far as everything that needed to be in front of us. We approved the library. We did approve the library. Whether the matching grant came in or not, we knew it needed $300,000 worth of work. We assumed that 150, and you all approved it as select board members, that it was going to be needed to be spent, whether it was matched or not. I really thought you were here to get the other 150.
Well,
And you know
you
what?
want to make my case?
I was willing to support that, because if the work needs to be done, we haven't done it in 30 years, we need to do it. We need to protect what we own now, the assets we own. I am very upset, though, that
the solar energy town center, $340,000 is on this list for ARPA committee, where Jeff said we've discussed this things. It's never been to the ARPA committee. We've never seen it. We have not approved it. So to be here asking the select board for Jeff, who is very much so wanting procedures to be followed and created, to do this go around the ARPA committee is just not okay. So I strongly recommend you stay to the 150,000 for the library, get the work done. If we've got to go to bond vote for the town center, then the solar panel stuff should not be plucked out of it and inserted into ARPA money. It should be, if you need 340,000 toward the town center project, it should not be specific to solar efficiency. Because I question, we went to natural gas. When did we go to natural gas? Didn't we do it? Didn't we do
5
I
years
said we
ago?
should go nuclear, but
5 years?
Yeah, it was about
5 years?
5.
It was 10, it's 10 year, it's a 10-year boiler.
Yeah.
Let's just say between 5 and 10 years, and we went to a high efficiency system when we did that. The life of that is longer than 10 years. So my concern is we have heat going out our windows, but we're going to change the heating system within a 10-year time period. I question the solar and efficiency side of things only because I've never been presented with the whole thing to know where I could have an opinion. But I'm just saying to you, I was presented with the town center for the library. I want the town center library to get their money out of the ARPA funding.
Denise, and then I'm going to comment.
Okay, so I am also a member of the ARPA committee, although I replaced another business owner, so I came in late. I also have never heard anything about the solar, the 340,000. I've never heard anything. And again, a process, Lori, you're absolutely correct. It's a process issue. We did hear briefly about digitizing town land records, but they never got back to us. So again, I am very nervous about the 340, and I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse.
Okay, so I will weigh in, speaking as the original chair of the ARPA committee who stepped back because I was burning my candle at 3 or 4 ends. I agree with what Kara and Lori and Lee said. We did discuss the library funds. We did approve the library funds. It just coincidentally happens that the money that's in the amended request happens to be a near match for what we already voted. It is a shovel-ready project. I think there's something to be said for that. I have no objection to solar. I have solar panels on my house. They work great, but I don't particularly see why we need to. I think it actually does set kind of a bad precedent to have had a process for ARPA review and then to suddenly come along and say, but my pet project. And again, I like solar, but my pet project is solar, and we don't even know if we're going to the bond may not pass, but let's put it in here. I just disagree with that process. I think it would be better to approve the $150,000 for the library and consider funding the solar if and when the time comes out of other funds.
Okay, this is Bart. I'd like to move to approve the use of $148,000 in ARPA funds for restoration work on the library building as presented here this evening.
Jay, this is David. I'll second.
Okay, other discussion, Jeff?
So I'd like to respond about the ARPA request. So the last time the ARPA committee met was in August. The town center committee did not get numbers from the architect until after that, September, late August, September was certainly after the ARPA committee meeting. The architects actually put a great deal of time into cost estimating all of the features. We are coming out with we're going to be starting our public outreach process at the end of this month, explaining what that project is, and it'll become more clear later on what that is. And there is a more formal request. It's the next agenda item on this agenda. My thinking, and I'm not trying to subvert anybody. I'm not trying to play tricks with the ARPA money. I'm not trying to advance a pet project. What I'm suggesting is that we had different pots of money for different reasons, and I'm fine with approving. I'd certainly approve a vote for this motion. This is my thinking. It's my thinking alone. I had to come up with it over the weekend and 3 o'clock in the morning last night. I'm trying to figure out where to shuffle all of these monies around. And it was my attempt to try to accommodate all of the requests. The town center was assumed early on that the town center was gonna come in for some request to be determined. This is what the to be determined number is. But this was my attempt to trying to accommodate all of the requests for the ARPA funds so that we don't have to pick and choose later on. The last thing I'll say is that it was clear from the get-go that sooner or later, all of the ARPA requests from the ARPA committee were going to run through the select board. And the select board took a pretty much of a back seat until that needed to happen. And it still doesn't need to happen. The ARPA money does not need to be allocated till the end of 2024 and spent until the end of 2026. That encompasses all of the shovel-ready projects that we're talking about. And my hope is that we'll be doing construction next summer on both the town center and the repairs to the library. So all of this is just accounting. And it's to my mind, it's in the same, I was thinking about it in terms of the reserve funds and where, what we're spending towards what, different things. So it wasn't an attempt to try to slip in a pet project that I think should happen, that nobody else thinks should happen. It's not a complete surprise, and it is something that we've talked about in the town center committee. And I'm fine voting yes on the way we have it set up right now.
Okay,
Jay, may I make one comment?
please.
Jeff, as a volunteer, I have always taken my boards incredibly serious, and it felt like a slap. When I saw this, it felt like a slap in the face that it had never come before our committee. And I hope it just felt like a slap in the face. It's like, why do we have committees and process and then see this on the board? So I
apologize for that. I certainly did not intend to offend any committee. The last time the ARPA committee met, we agreed not to meet again until the select board asked. This came up from last Thursday to this Monday. And what I was trying to do was to accommodate the $450,000 recreation request and the request from the town center committee and the request from the library.
Okay.
In the same shot. So
we have 14 months though.
Okay, I appreciate everything everybody has said, and I know no one meant to offend, but as far as the library, I'd like to go ahead and, I know Kara's hand is up, but I think for as far as the library money is concerned, I think we can probably go ahead and have that vote. So please state your name and your vote.
This is Jeff.
182.
This is the 140.
148.
48.
No.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Lisa, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to, as Jeff said, the next agenda item. We moved item,
Are we sharing my
Oh,
screen?
yeah, we moved.
what's the,
So we're doing L now.
It's been a coup.
yes, item L is now, before us.
Mine? So like your screen, do I stop share? No. Not that, stop share, got it. Sorry.
Nope, you're good.
Apologize for that.
Okay, so item L, is discussion of American Rescue Plan Act fund request from the Town Center Committee. And I'm trying to find that in the memo because it got moved. 252, thank you, sir. And it's pretty much generic. So Jeff, it simply says discussion of fund request. So go ahead and make the request.
Let me, can you pull it up, Joshua?
The attachment. What is that?
Yeah, from the town center committee, it was in our packet, right?
Renovation project.
That one.
I can get into it. Okay, so we are getting it to the exciting stage.
A point of order.
Sure, go ahead.
Because this hasn't done due process, is it possible that we can table this until it goes before the ARPA committee so that we know what's in it and what it is, so we can discuss it, ask questions before it comes
That's
back?
certainly an option that could be made, but I think we should at least hear the request first. And then we can, if somebody wishes to vote to table, we can. Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, so where we stand in the process for the town center is that we have gone through 5 years of 4 to 5 years worth of research and investigation on what to do about housing our town services. What we've landed on is not adding to this building at all, is to, that it's less expensive to renovate this building than to build new, whether it be here on this site or some other site that's unknown. So we came up with a $10.2 million, was it?
That's 9.85. But yes, it was 10.2.
I think it was 10.2. And the town center committee wanted to get it below 10 million. And so we started taking things off that were could do rather than must do or should do. A must do, it would be a new heating and ventilation system. A should do is if you're doing that, then you should be dealing with the windows, because otherwise you'd be oversizing the heating system. If you replace the windows without doing the heating system, you wouldn't have ventilation. So those are the examples of things that are must do, should do. There are very few things left in the budget that are could do, and one of them was solar. We strongly recommend, so we can fit solar on this part of the roof, with the roof the way it is. For the post office roof, it needs to be, the rafters need to be beefed up in order to accommodate the solar there. And so what I have done with the knowledge of the town center committee is to take that's the solar piece of the project and isolate it as something that wouldn't necessarily be in the bond amount, but could be funded through another source. Similarly, we got an estimate. There is one of the nice things about there's a federal program now that'll give us 30% of the installation cost as a direct payment, and so that reduces it to $215,000. And I estimated what the production would be from solar. It's about, since we don't know what we're proposing doing in this building, is we have to move the heating system out of the basement for flood resiliency purposes. If we're going to move it, and we're going to be doing a 50-year project, what we're recommending is that we go to heat pumps, go to an all-electric heating system, rather than installing a fossil fuel heating system with all the accompany of that. We heard a lot of comments about if we're going to be doing a lot of work on this building, we should make it as energy efficient and reduce our fossil fuel usage if we possibly can. And so what the incremental cost of doing that, of going to a different type of heating system, we're told by the architects, is $125,000. And that's how I got to $340,000. So to me, it fits the definition of what, and the criteria that the ARPA committee set up initially. It will provide a return in a sense, in that it'll reduce by investing in these things above and beyond the base code. It'll reduce our operating expenses.
I just have a question. Could we pull up the table we were looking at earlier that I think was yours, Jeff?
With the dollars?
With the ARPA dollars?
Yep.
And I think it illustrates it being 9:30 at night, and probably the appropriate suggestion that we send this to the ARPA committee. I want to see that total,
Okay.
that other table.
Josh, I think you have to stop sharing in order for me to
Sorry,
share.
I'm sharing now.
You're oversharing, John.
Okay.
That right column could be revised allocation. So the first one's going up to 148, then the math filters down.
Yeah.
And presumably it's going to be a deficit. So then someone's going to have to change to hit the target, right?
Right. The way I figure it, we've got 258,000, give or take, left after all that. Actually, my math isn't very good, but we would, take out the $10,000 for MMCTV, right? But yeah, we could partially fund the solar from ARPA if the ARPA committee comes back and says that's a good idea, but then we'd have to make up the rest from elsewhere.
The upside? Arguably, if we proceed in this fashion, whatever the 340 turns out to be, the ARPA funds would then be fully obligated.
And we wouldn't have to worry about it anymore.
And we'd be done if ARPA committee agrees with it.
That's one way to do it.
I'm fine with that. If also if the Volunteers Green Committee actually comes up with a project that's $450,000.
And that's an unknown.
That's an unknown at this point.
The one other thing I'd say is that description, it's not the recreation committee per se.
It is, right?
It's the ad hoc committee.
Yeah, so that's just housekeeping.
Thank you.
But I think it would be reasonable to send this back to the ARPA committee to look at a revised table. What's the amount that they think the solar efficiency makes sense? And on the face of it, it seems plausible. And then our remaining dollars, our target should be exactly zero, right?
Okay.
To fully authorize or obligate.
Okay, Kara?
Jeff, I respectfully ask you as the chair of the ARPA committee to rescind your request tonight and take it before the ARPA committee in the package.
I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to do that.
There will save select board time so they can get on to their next agenda item. I respectfully ask that you do that. And I appreciate you considering the request.
I'll happily do that. It's gonna be a little while because I'm completely booked up through the end of the month. But
That's okay, you got until 2024.
Jeff is personally responsible for making Halloween come.
And you have the bond vote in March too, so you technically could wait till the bond vote occurred.
one of the things that I would suggest for us to do is for us to land on ARPA, is to set a date at a future agenda item and to close it out, to come up,
November.
yeah, it could be a while. It doesn't, it could be, like Kara says, it could be in March.
Well, I agree with what Bard said. If I think solar is a completely legitimate expense, I think it just needs to go through the processes and we'd be overspending it. So we'd have to come up with the money from elsewhere. But to your point, we would then be able to write 30 on the ARPA project.
Which comes out to be
right.
a net zero remaining.
Okay. So since Jeff has agreed to withdraw that, and since it is late, I'd like to move on to our next item on the agenda.
Thank you.
G. Item G, we have 2 access permits, one for 595 Huntington Road. There's an existing access, but they are proposing to replace it with a different access. If you could just real quick show us the maps. Lori says they can leave, but I'm staying.
No, I was.
No, you
can.
It's great places.
It happens every time.
9:30, that's like, I need wine.
Yeah.
I think I drink more wine than I've drunk in like the last 2 years. At every meal, if I didn't order wine with my meal, they looked at me like,
"What's up?"
I just got used to saying Vino Tinto, and they just bring me a glass of whatever red wine they wanted to get rid of. It was easier that way.
And it was all at least decent.
Yeah, I had not a single bad glass.
This is really just moving their existing driveway about 210 feet.
Is that the house that's there?
It's what?
That's the house that has the.
Yeah, so as you come down Heinsberg Road, and you're making the left-hand turn, the non-functioning radar speed feedback sign is right about here.
Yep.
As a landmark.
It's only when they're ground level.
So he just wants to move his driveway up about 210 feet, kind of up the hill. Pete's looked at the sight lines and has said it's no problem, and then the existing driveway will be discontinued per the zoning regulations once the new driveway is in.
And there's some gravel on the side.
Yeah, there's a little bit, a little bit left over from the flood. There's quite a bit actually that flowed into.
Is he gonna decommission the existing driveway?
He will have to, yeah, because zoning regulations only allow you to have one access.
That's surprising.
I see no actual downside to approving
Okay,
it.
because then the hill kind of.
Jay, this is David.
looked at it, yeah.
Approve access permit application AC 2023-04 for an access at 595 Huntington Road.
Jay, this is Bart. I'd like to second David's motion.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion made by David Sander, seconded by Bard Hill, to approve access permit AC 2023-04 for an access at 595 Huntington Road. Please state your name and your vote.
Do
Oh,
we need to also stipulate that the old one's removed? I mean, that's part of the.
That's part of the
Sorry, I'm
application.
not even-
Yeah, you know,
in here.
and it'd be a zoning violation if they didn't,
Yeah,
so
right.
it would be.
Okay,
Get some fines.
so please state your name and your vote.
This is Jeff, I.
Lisa, I.
David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, and then we have another permit access for 2260 Stage Road.
Hold on up here in a minute, too.
Pete's okay with this?
Here he is. So this is a new lot.
This is David. I move to approve.
Well, just for voters at home watching this later, they'd like to know what the heck we're approving.
So it's a driveway here. This is. So we're approving an entrance.
Yeah, this required some engineering. This is
Yeah, so there's a little bit more in the packet than you need for an access permit, but it's a new lot on 2260 Stage Road, so this will be the access for it. It's not as easily landmarked here because Stage Road doesn't have as many intersections. But yeah, it'll be an access for a driveway to a new dwelling.
Are those horizontal lines like, you know?
Those are elevation gradients, I
Well,
think.
actually, some of this there's some tree, well, is it horizontal?
He's talking about the road, the lines across the
Existing
road.
Across the
road.
road.
Oh, across the road here?
No,
Are
over
they
here.
water bars or? what
On
are-
the actual snake-like driveway.
Oh, here? Oh,
yeah.
I'm not sure what that designates.
Scale.
Maybe they just look cool.
Vertebrae.
It looks like a snake to me.
It's really steep.
Snake
you
or
know?
worm.
It is really steep.
There's a,
So those, I'm
It's-
assuming those are elevation gradients.
Yes.
That reflect
Oh.
the slope of the road as it goes up a steep area.
Steady
But
hill, isn't
Yeah.
what is it?
It's probably a different scale than the rest of the top.
Is there another? Let's see.
I think it had a gradient on the.
And I mean, the DRB will review the slope and the pitch and everything.
Well, but you notice by doing kind of a switchback, they're making the slope less than it otherwise would have been.
That's usually
That's
the
their point.
plan, yeah.
Yeah.
And Pete signed off on it.
So yeah, if someone wants to move it, now that we've seen it,
So the other question I had was about the culvert. So like, we own the culvert, right? Once they put it in, we own it.
Once they put it in, yeah, that's the way it works. It'll
if
be in
it's
the,
built.
it'll be in the right of way, and yeah, Pete gives them specs on what they need to do.
Once it's inspected, we maintain it, right? So like, and Pete's comfortable, it's big enough, like this is the area that got really hammered.
oh yeah,
State
half the
road
road
was
was gone.
incredible.
Yeah, I mean, if he wasn't, he would, he put in 15
Okay.
by 30 culvert, so he's looked at this.
Okay,
So I move to approve access permit application AC 2023-02 for an access at 2260 Stage Road.
Bart, I second that.
okay, we have a motion to approve access permit AC 2023-02 for an access at 2260 Stage Road. The motion was made by David Sander and was seconded by Bart Hill. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
Jeff, I.
Lisa, I.
David, I.
Bart, aye.
And J.I. Okay, we are moving. Our next item is item I, which is a request from the Trails Committee. The Trails Committee has work to do to repair trails. There's information in their packet, the packet about various things they wanted to do, but per the memo, at the last minute, the co-chair of the Trails Committee, Hannah Harrington, informed us that they're not ready to proceed with the entire request, and they only want to request $1,684 that was left unspent from a previously approved request to be used to repair damage to the river shore trail. So they're basically saying, well, you already approved this money, but we're asking you to redirect it, reallocate it. So it's pretty non-controversial to me. It's a money we already have said they could spend. We're just giving them permission to spend it elsewhere.
Judy, just so you know.
Judy, go ahead.
Judy's here. Maybe more info.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to mention that Hannah had emailed to say that she had to leave. She thought this item would come up earlier, and so I'm going to represent them if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So yeah, no, you're right. They decided to just ask for those remaining funds from the previous project, whose all that work they had done on repairing all those bridges had been wiped out by the flood. They had a little money left, so they're hoping to use that towards repairing the bridges.
Okay.
This is Bart. Jay, if I could, I just note that this is described as River Shore Trail flood recovery expenses in the attachment in our packet. But it's less than the total. That's 2,600 and change and 4,000 for materials. So it would appear to be partial funding of that full repair as described in this document, which does not seem to have a date.
Judy, if you have more information.
Yeah, I had suggested that the Trails Committee put in a request for additional money to complete the work, but I think they were not quite ready to do that. And so they asked that they could just use the remaining money from the previous project. And if they needed more funds, they would make a separate application. So the addendum is a little confusing because it has numbers from different projects and from the 4,000 that we threw in there to get the rest of the materials for completing that work. And I have a clarifying question. I know we need 3 bids if we're hiring contractors, but if we're just purchasing materials, does that need multiple estimates?
Purchasing $1,600 worth of lumber from like Home Supply is not going to trigger that. No, you'll be fine.
Yeah, or the 4,000 because they'll probably need some more materials. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing.
I mean, technically anything over 1,000, you're supposed to get 3 quotes.
For materials, so.
For a thing, so if you're, yeah, but I mean, if you're buying bits and pieces here and there, like we can talk after this to make sure you're adhering to procurement policies, but I think you're sort of for little bits for bridges is probably not.
But a phone quote.
Call Home Depot how much you get for 2x4s.
Right,
like that would be about what you need to do.
Jay, I'm not sure that the purchase mechanism is directly relevant to the motion at hand because it assumes that, of course, we follow or they would follow purchasing. It's really then our purpose is today to approve the 1,680.
There you go.
Reallocation.
Okay, so I don't think anybody moved this, or do I misremember?
No, so
I will move to approve a request from the Richmond Trails Committee for the use of $1,684 remaining from the 2022 Conservation Fund allocation for a bridge repair project to be used for repairs to the River Shore Trail related to damages from recent flooding.
Lisa, I'll second.
Okay, who got the second in first?
Lisa.
Lisa, okay. Jeff, go ahead.
So I wonder if we could use the rec path reserve fund and use it up on this project. We've got $1,200 in that fund, and that would close out that fund.
I don't know. We get to find out.
Okay, so that's just a suggestion.
They're going to have continual trail issues.
Further discussion, I would say that $1,200 could easily be used by some of the rest of the funding that was originally proposed. I think there's probably would need to consuming that available funds, assuming it's eligible as described.
But it's just something to keep in mind. Maybe we can get rid of that fund by using it.
Maybe let's communicate that to the Trails Committee that the rec path
We don't want to know.
funding might be useful.
We have to figure out exactly what the rec path was established for, and what could be transferred to.
Sounds like
There's a few of these mystery funds out there and they're hard to unravel, which is why they've remained for so long.
I can't sit still any longer. I want to move on to the most exciting thing of the agenda
Yeah.
tonight.
Well, wait, did we vote?
We have not voted.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion was made by Bard and seconded by Lisa to approve this reallocation. Please state your name and your vote.
This is Jeff, I.
Lisa, aye.
David, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, our next item on the agenda, which we've all been chuckling about all evening, is actually a very serious request. It looks strange on the agenda. The Conservation Commission, working with a group called Richmond's Save Our Salamanders Network, has made a request. Has made a request for some money to put signs up on Cochrane Road to remind drivers to look out for frogs and salamanders crossing the road at peak times. And I know what they're talking about. They're on a good rainy night. There could be, I don't know, many, like hundreds of frogs on the road.
Birds too. They're
Um,
hard.
now-
Amphibians.
No, I have a question because the memo says, I apologize, I lost it. The memo says,
Line 210.
line 210, says $150. But in the information in the packet, item 3J1, they are asking for $100 in conservation funds to cover fees for safety vest clickers and salamander signs. And then a little lower down, they are requesting funds for 2 frog crossing signs, and that's 50 plus 25 plus 60. The numbers don't total up to 150.
Uh-oh, that was probably me. Sorry, you guys. We can remove the clickers to make the total come to 150, whatever.
Well, 50 50 for the frog signs, 25 for the posts, that's 75. 40 for the safety vests, that's going to be 115, plus 100 for the salamander signs. So that's
That second set of signs is redundant. We were asking for 3 signs, some safety vests and the clickers.
okay. So are they salamander signs or frog signs?
They are, I think they might say herps. I don't remember. Did we put a picture in the packet?
It says frog crossing.
Yep.
Yeah, I think they're frog crossing.
Okay, so we won't have dedicated salamander crossing signs. It'll just be assumed that if it's an amphibian and it's on the road, don't run over it.
Right. If you would like us to get something more specific, we could.
Well, no, I'm not really.
Yeah.
I'm just wanting to make sure we give you the right amount of money.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We changed our minds several times, so the money, I see where I missed the edit.
150 is what you want?
Yep, that would be great.
Okay, so in due diligence, this is taxpayer money. Any questions about this from any member of the board?
Are the signs, do you have something to attach the signs to?
Posts.
We included posts and perhaps right, 25 for the posts, right?
Safety vests are for the frogs to
Yeah,
wear.
we're gonna put those vests on little frogs.
Right.
They'll look really great.
Well, I move to approve up to $150 in conservation reserve funds to cover the cost of safety vests, clickers, and 2 metal signs and posts as described in the Richmond Save Our Salamanders Network proposal dated October 10th, 2023. And that these funds must be expended within 3 years of the date of final approval by approximately October 16th, 2023.
That's today.
2026, right?
Sorry.
3 years from today.
Okay.
From the state, from
Okay, so we need to make sure the motion is for 2026. Okay, we have a motion from Jeff Ford, seconded by Bard Hill, to authorize the Richmond Conservation Commission to spend $150 from conservation reserve funds to pay for vests, clickers, signs, and posts as requested by the Richmond Save Our Salamanders Network. These funds must be expended by October 16th, 2026. Any further discussion?
Aaron has her hand up.
Aaron, go ahead.
Hey, this is just a question from me, Aaron Wag. Hi. So what are the signs? What's the expectation? Like you're driving along, it's a bunch of hopping going on in the road. What is the expectation of the motorist? Like stop moving your vehicle, honk your horn until you don't see any hopping? I mean, what's the end goal? Or are these signs there for like the time when you're doing a special count? So I'm just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, the plan is there will probably be people there trying to facilitate the crossing, but the signs are also up just in general as awareness that we, are sharing the landscape with these vulnerable critters. So if you can avoid driving on rainy nights, or to direct people that there's a group in town that's concerned about this. So if you care too, you can join the group. So some education outreach and some safety for people helping to move the frogs and salamanders across the road.
I note that in other communities, special tunnels have been built. Did you guys explore that possibility?
This is sort of a pilot project. We're kind of trying to find like where are the concentrated areas of frog crossing? Because those tunnels and culverts can be pretty expensive. So we want to just make sure these are good places. You know, there's a crossing on Route 2, but that's more complicated because it's a state highway. So we just thought we'd do a cheapo first try and then go on from there. But thank you. That's a great idea for sure. Good goal.
Does this mean that you would want to close Cochrane Road for any period of time in the evening when it was raining?
I don't think so. I know, you know, Jim Andrews, who developed the Vermont Herb Atlas, has done a lot of the frog and salamander saving efforts in the state. You don't necessarily need to close it, especially Cochrane Road isn't exactly a high traffic area, but we would, you know, have flashlights. That's what the safety vests are for. And, you know, probably those orange cones just to get people to slow down a bit. Dark rainy nights aren't high visibility. So
Cohort is volunteering to be on site to help them across.
Great.
Okay, how serious is this because it is the hour is late. Is there any further legitimate discussion before we vote?
It is a worthy endeavor.
Okay,
Thank you,
please
Bart.
take your name and your vote on paying for frog signs.
This is Jeff, I.
Lisa, aye.
David, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, we are actually on the home stretch. Most of the remaining items are
Thank you.
relatively. Oh, thank you, Judy.
Judy.
And thank thank the rest of the committee. It's an interesting project to bring forward. Okay, the next item on the agenda has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, I'd like to give a little bit of background because people have heard a lot of terms going around. The town has participated over the last couple of years in a couple different programs, which sometimes are hard to tell apart. There's a program called the Welcoming and Engaging Communities Cohort. And then there's a separate group, the Ideal Cohort. The Ideal Cohort is being run by the State Office of Racial Equity. I think I'm going to call it Susanna Davis and Company. Jeff and I were taking part in that. The meetings were very far afield and participation was dropping, and I simply didn't have the time to drive to Brattleboro to take part in a 2-hour meeting. And they really were stressing, you got to be in person. That's not this. So basically the town is at this point really not participating in Ideal because you are?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to drop out.
You
decided not to
do it by
Okay. So this is the other program, Welcoming and Engaging Communities. And who is running this program? Is it VLCT or?
Yeah, so it goes through VLCT, but it's with Abundant Sun, and Jude Reichley Smith is the.
You've all met Jude.
Yeah, so we already, well, I'll let you finish.
Well, Abundant Sun is a Burlington firm that does DEI education. The Jude Reichley Smith, if I'm horribly mispronouncing her name, tell me, has presented to us on what they've done. It is a worthwhile program, provided you have time. They ask that at least they ask for 3 members from each town. June and Josh were our participating members. If there's a select board member who would like to take part, or a department head who would like to take part, they simply have to speak up. Keith Oborn, our planning and zoning director, has said he'd be interested. So the $64,000 question is there anybody on the select board who would like to also take part?
Yeah, I'll just add one other thing. So this is sort of round 2 of this, as Jay said. A lot of it was getting data about the town from employees and volunteers, and then they generated sort of a report for that. And I'll admit, I think that this round 2 sort of came in a little bit of a misunderstanding because Jude had reached out asking, I think, we thought that actually if June and I would participate in round 2 to kind of help mentor. And I wrote back, I'm a little confused. Do you want us to participate again? And she's like, well, no, I wanted you to help mentor, but maybe a town could participate again. And I'm like, well, I don't know if we wanted to. She's like, well, that'd be great. And I'm like, but it's so heavily data driven with our town. So, but I did get a lot out of it. Like personally, I thought it was a really good program. So I think what she's going to do is if any town wants to reapply, they can, but she'd probably give first priority to towns that haven't yet participated. And we wouldn't have to go back out and collect all the data again since we just did it last year. So Keith, and if there's 2 more people that wanted to participate, would go through the program and probably learn everything that they had taught. But we do have the report from them already from participating in this one. It's not that we've had a chance to do much with it, but we do have the report. So I just wanted to add that sort of level of that it's kind of
And
the
if
same
we,
program again.
and if we only have 2 people interested, that's still okay, potentially?
It seems like they really want 3.
Okay.
I mean, but we can still apply.
They can always turn us down.
I guess.
When they had the meetings, were the meetings typically in person or remote or both?
No, so they were remote and they were once every, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks. It was really manageable, honestly, for my time. It was like a couple hours every 2-3 weeks, and pretty educational.
Okay.
So it was
So
1 or 2 in person, but that was like at the
So we-
beginning and the end.
we know Keith wants to take part. This is your chance, members of the select board. Do you want to take part? Yeah. No,
I'm already doing the ideal, so I think that's,
I guess the answer is no.
All right.
Are there any other town staff that might?
I don't know. I mean, I asked that it was a department, so she said department heads or select board members. And I kind of pulled department heads and it sounded like Keith was really the only one that was ready, willing, and able and had time for it.
Would Tyler be allowed? I don't know if Tyler would be interested, but I mean, discussions I've had with him in the past, it seems like he might
He
be.
might be. Yeah.
Or like planning commission chair? Can we go into?
Yeah, I
Conditions?
can,
Could be relevant, actually, housing and whatnot.
I can see if, I mean, do you want to say, if
Electrical from.
I think offering it to Virginia, at least all she has to do is say no.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I can do a little bit more outreach, and if like we get 2 more people, we can apply, and if we don't, we don't. Does that?
Maybe anybody else on
Sound
the
all right?
housing committee, said,
Connie,
I think something vertical like that,
Yeah.
that was key and like. Planning commission, housing committee, where there's a logical.
there's a logical
Right.
nexus there.
It's working incredible. Yeah.
Well, I can ask, I'll ask Virginia and maybe Tyler, and if they're all interested, we'll submit, and if they're not, then we maybe don't.
but we need a motion either way.
I mean, maybe make a motion if we can find sufficient interest.
Okay.
If, I mean, if it works for you guys.
So if I wants to make it
So where is it?
page 240, line 249.
Page 6. I move to submit an application to participate in the welcoming and engaging communities cohort if the town manager can find sufficient interest in town staff or volunteers.
Okay, we have a motion from Jeff, seconded by Lisa Miller, to submit an application to the Welcome Engaging Communities Cohort, provide the town manager can find 3 interested staff members or volunteers.
Yeah.
Please state your name and your vote.
It's Jeff, I.
Lisa, I.
David, I.
Bart, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, our next item is a quick one, is a staffing update, which is usually provided with the quarterly financials. So we have not done a staffing update since April 2023. So for the select board and for voters listening and watching this later, administration, which is basically the town center staff, fully staffed, no changes. Highway, fully staffed, no changes. Police, there is the contracted chief position. Well, there is the chief position, which we've currently contracted out. But that position is hypothetically open. 3 full-time positions and 3 part-time positions open for a total of 7 positions theoretically open. If we do, we have heard, I believe, from a few people who might be interested in applying, but nothing concrete. No one's turned in an application yet. Library, Jennifer Esser, who was working 20 hours a week, resigned in May and was replaced with Suzanne Crone, who is working 24 hours, which qualified her to be added to the VMERS retirement system. Melissa Lawler, who has already been working there, went up to 24 hours, so she's also in VMERS now. And Jennifer Sprague is working occasionally as a substitute, so irregular hours as the need arises. Planning and zoning, fully staffed, no changes. Finally, water and sewer. Our lead process operator and acting superintendent Alan Carpenter resigned in August to take a job elsewhere. Steve Cote, no, he's just Cote, right? Chief Cody has been promoted to water and wastewater superintendent. There are 2 open positions and we are actually currently interviewing for them. Okay, and that is our staffing update. Any questions? Okay, monthly planning and zoning update. So our planning and zoning director, Keith Oborn, has put in our packet information about what has, let's see, this should be item N.
Yes.
It's 3 pages. I'm not going to read all 3 pages, but it's an update to the select board on what's going on. The planning commission is working on the proposed Village Residential North and Village Residential South districts. They're looking at Rogers Lane also. They had a meeting on October 4th from the town of Jericho concerning affordable housing. The Transportation Committee is going to present to us on November 5th about their pinch point study. The Share the Road Subcommittee, which we authorized 6 months or so ago, is going forward. They are working on a contest for Share the Road signs and have already gotten some prizes to award in the contest. They're reaching out to the schools to see if they're interested in participating. The Thompson Huntington Bridge and Cochrane Road intersection, the Transportation Committee will be choosing a preferred alternative in October and making a presentation, and then we'll reach out to the public. A fiscal year UPWP grant award for Cochrane Road was discussed. And there is a scope of work, but it should be ready by actually it says October 24th. So that's the October 24th Transportation Committee meeting, not Select Board, because we don't have a meeting then. So stuff is going on there. Alan Knowles, who, as many of you know, long-term member of the Transportation Committee, has resigned. There is now a vacancy we need to fill. In closing, the Housing Committee is still meeting. There has been stuff going on there. Nothing super exciting, but I thank them for their work. And the Zoning Administration and Development, the DRB, has authorized 54 zoning permits, 9 single-family dwellings, 4 accessory dwelling units, 17 DRB applications for things like subdivision, conditional use, and site plan. And there's as always stuff going on. The CCRPC, we have gotten a seat on the Clean Water Advisory Committee. That should help us stay abreast of stormwater issues.
And salamanders.
Yeah.
That's clean.
And anything, I'm not going to read the rest, but anybody in the public who's interested in the full line-by-line 3-page list, the September-October planning and zoning update is in the packet on the website. Are there questions, Jeff?
Yeah, what is it?
The one comment I would make is that, he puts these in every month. And it would appear that we're getting our money's worth out of him. He seems to be working very hard. I appreciate these reports.
Yeah. Lisa, you had a question?
Just the additional comments, the new comments, the first one, I don't quite understand it.
Which page?
Page 3.
Okay, on page 3.
No, new comments, first scofflaw interest by Levant.
Go ahead.
So this is an idea to take the current list of the assessors and compare the data of that to where we were prior, and then try to do research to see if they all have permits. And then if they don't have permits, follow up. It's quite involved.
Yeah.
We provided the lists to Kara Labauti, who requested them. But we don't have time to go through and do that comparison ourselves.
Right.
No, that's what citizens are for.
It's well,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
We don't want to offend anybody, but it is a project that, while in a perfect world would be nice to have, it would be fairly involved.
we didn't have time for have to do things. I mean,
Right. But to your point, Keith and Tyler both are putting in a lot of hours, and they're demonstrating, I think, why we need full-time people in those positions. And
don't let anyone take Keith or Tyler, really.
Whether they're a good job.
okay. Then we have the Richmond Rescue Quarterly Report. Josh, do you want to summarize that? or comment on that?
I didn't really review that.
I
apologize.
confess I have not.
Looks like Bart has his hand up.
Oh, go ahead.
This is Bard. One of the things that we contemplated and thought about at times is relative response times from Heinsberg to Richmond and Richmond to Heinsberg. So embedded in the Richmond rescue data is response times from their headquarters over here to Heinsberg, which average is 18 minutes, 17 minutes. So let's guess it's similar coming perhaps from Heinsberg to Richmond.
The police might drive faster.
They can't.
Actually, I watch them. They do.
Yes. So I'm just gonna say, so within Richmond, the response time for rescue is 7 to 8 minutes, and in Heinsberg, it's 17 to 18. Let's guess you can truncate that a little bit for police. It's still relatively fast by a national standard to get live from your headquarters to that place. Recognizing also that there's going to be more variation for police response time because people may be on patrol in various locations. So it could be shorter or longer than that. But I thought it's just sort of an interesting benchmark or comparison.
Okay, and I will add a couple things.
Waiting, but
Yeah.
this doesn't sound well.
I apologize to Richmond Rescue for not having, I had not quite gotten to this in the packet when we had to come to the meeting. But the summary is actually very brief. I'll just skim over it. A longtime volunteer, Rich Dana, retired from Richmond Rescue after 25 years. He will still be volunteering with the Richmond Fire Department, but we thank him. We thank anybody who volunteers for Richmond Rescue, especially somebody who has been there 25 years and done as much as Rich has. They've hired a full-time employee. Their fourth, Sarah Cooper, she will be their injury prevention and public safety program manager as public outreach coordinator. Richmond Rescue was recently designated a pediatric safe ambulance service. Only 15 other agencies in the state have that designation. This statewide initiative recognizes agencies that go beyond basic requirements to provide excellent care to Vermont's children. Their car seat fitting program and bike helmet giveaway are two of the programs that help them earn the award. And then the backcountry rescue team has been busy. And finally, they have been a one truck service. They only have one ambulance right now, as the other one has been sent to Ohio for remounting on a new chassis. So instead of buying a brand new, net new ambulance, they're taking the cab and equipment off and just putting it on a truck chassis. And that's going to save about 30% of the cost of a new ambulance, which is, it's very prudential.
Yeah.
But as always, we are extremely fortunate to have Richmond Rescue, and I thank all the people who find time to volunteer there.
Yeah.
Okay, and that brings us in our agenda to approval of minutes, warrants, and purchase orders. So we have two sets of minutes, the minutes from October 2nd, which I was not at, and the minutes from the budget meeting on October 10th.
Read them both. I'll move that we approve both sets of minutes. Or do you want to do them one at a time?
I think we should do one at a time. So we have a motion to approve the minutes of October 2nd. Do we have a second?
This is David. I'll second.
Okay, are there any changes, additions, corrections, deletions to the minutes? I was not here, so I won't be voting.
This is Jeff. I.
Lisa, aye.
David, I.
I'll abstain. This is Bart for October 2nd.
Yeah, I will abstain as well. So that's 3 ayes and 2 abstains. Okay, the minutes of the October 10th budget meeting. Any comments?
This is
None?
David. Move to approve.
A second.
And motion from David Sander to approve October 10th, seconded by Lisa Miller. Please state your name and your vote.
It's Jeff. I.
Lisa, aye.
David, I.
Bart, aye.
And J.I. We have one purchase order, I believe, purchase order 4806 for
A loan.
It's a
for
loan?
Jericho Road and fire truck, fire truck. It's an odd combination for this loan. That is the loan.
So the loan, the PO is for $117,164.75 to be paid to US Bank for the fire truck loan and the Jericho Road loan, Jericho Road projects. Any
We're still
questions?
paying for a $10,005 fire truck?
Like, what was that, 2008?
And the water.
It looks like 2008, actually. I apologize.
Okay.
I think that it's, that looks like an 8 there. That could go either way.
I,
What does it say? Here, it's not much clearer. No, let's see, does it say anything else? Either way, it's a fire truck. We still have money on it. It's probably, I don't know,
It is what it is. I mean, we've already.
whether it's 5 or 8, the payment's still the same. I'm sorry, if the writing's not more clear, and that's not my fault this time.
so in the motion
Usually it's
for
my fault.
purchase order 4806 to US Bank in the amount of 117,164.75.
Okay, this is David. Move to approve.
The second.
Okay, a motion from David Sanders, seconded by Jeff Ford to approve purchase order 4806 to US Bank in the amount of $117,164.75. Please state your name and your vote.
Jeff, I.
Lisa, I.
David, I.
Art, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, we need to approve the warrants.
This is David. I move to approve the warrants.
Bart, I'll second that.
Any questions about the warrants?
I do have a few questions. I think I can make them quick. One is on the electric bills. If it's not too much trouble for Connie, if they could include, if she could include the second page on the electric bills, then I can get a better sense of how much electricity is actually used.
Because you're kind of looking at that too.
The purchase order for mow and maintain properties was for 20,000. I thought we approved much higher than that. So
Yeah, that's only, so it's split between fiscal years.
Right.
So there's another purchase order for May and June. And then there's one for July, August, September, October, and some fall cleanup.
Okay, that answers my question.
I had a question, and it's, I think I know the answer. We have obviously the usual payroll warrants, we have the general warrants, but then we have the FEMA warrant, which has 2 line items. They're otherwise purchases of things we do already. Is the reason for breaking this out because these are expenses we expect to be reimbursed by FEMA?
Correct.
Okay. So Heinsberg Sand and Gravel and Pike Industries for asphalt.
Yeah, that was for specifically related to repairs from the flood. So we're trying to track that all separately. And as we begin our process of reimbursement from FEMA, that's going to be very helpful.
Okay.
I have a procedural question, and forgive me, I should know this. Water Sewers hired MSK engineers to do an inventory of the wastewater treatment plant. Do we approve those invoices, or is this Water Sewer?
Water and sewer.
Water and sewer, yeah.
Did an invoice get into the wrong warrant?
There's an invoice in here for $4,177.50 for MSK engineers. Or it looks like it says Richmond Water Department.
Waterline inventory. Okay, so the motion to approve the warrants should probably be amended to say accept that one, because that one needs to be approved by water and sewer.
I'm sorry, I usually try to catch those.
Josh.
Okay.
One gotcha for the year.
It does happen. Okay.
Are you looking at it? Is there a signature on it?
Well, it's the new invoice, right?
It's an invoice.
Yeah.
It's purchase order 4668.
So the purchase order's already been signed. It's just the approval of the invoice, and I'm almost sure, I know exactly what he's talking about.
Okay.
So we'll just have to get them in the next round with
Okay.
water sewer.
Proposed amendment to the motion. Motion was to approve the warrants made by David. David, do you consent to modifying it to exclude that one?
I do. Motion to approve is amended.
Okay.
Okay, I'll second that. I do have one other comment. It's I think it's one of the last invoices is for the water sewer department for this building. It appears that we have 4 meters going into this building, and we're paying customer service charges for 4 meters.
I see 3. Where's the 4?
Wait a minute, where's the,
I'm not sure why.
is that,
4th floor was probably broken out as a separate charge.
We're paying them, so we're paying for each of those. So
Well, one of them might be the highway department.
no,
it's just
it's for the.
I'm sorry, I'm leaving the totals. I'm not looking at the individual ones. I'm sorry.
It's for this particular building. This is the Richmond Town Center.
So we should probably not be paying the 3rd floor
kitchen.
So you're looking at the fixed cost on that bill, right, is for,
Even when the, I believe even when the school department was up here, we paid for the water. You know, like we paid for the heat.
But it was a separate charge because they're a separate.
We don't necessarily need the meters,
I don't
suggesting.
I don't think we, so I don't, yeah, I don't think we have 4 meters. I think it's 4 fixed costs.
Right.
You know, are we looking at that correctly?
Because they're separate.
So there's,
users, but that should be fixed because this should roll over into the town.
think that's where that is. So let me just pull that up and just make sure we're talking about the same thing. I think.
Probably
Just
paying.
arbitrarily kind of figured that.
Well,
It would appear to me that we pay this quarterly and, you know, it actually, you know, it's a couple.
So you're
couple
looking
thousand
at-
dollars.
you're looking at right here, right?
Yeah, so you see, we have fixed costs for four.
Yeah, so that, and we can check on it, but that's typically when you count, you can have 1 meter, but many uses behind it. So for instance, the Big Spruce has 1 meter, but they get a fixed cost for their business and 2 fixed costs, 1 for each of the apartments upstairs, if they have 2, whatever they have. So there's 1 meter, but there's different fixed costs based on the uses inside that building.
So this was probably the post office, town administration, and it would have been on the 3rd floor.
But they don't pay a separate.
Doesn't matter.
The point is there is a it's tricky how we allocate the water, but we allocated a unit and
Let me give you another example. You got an apartment building with 4 apartments, there's 4 units, could be 1 meter. Could be 4 meters, could be 1 meter.
right.
For equity, we called it 4 units.
I got you, okay.
Versus charge the people with 4 meters, 4 units, and the 4 apartments on 1 meter, 1 unit. So it's still worth asking the question, what are the 4 units in this building? And I'm not clear, but I think that's a follow-up question.
That's actually something that we've been wanting to do really on a property by property basis for some time. Because right now there are situations on Bridge Street. There are situations on Bridge Street where a property may be listed as having 3 units, but they've since subdivided and now they should be being billed for 4 or 2.
Yeah, right.
And people tend to just keep on paying what they've always paid, but we could be charging less, we could be charging more. We don't know.
I don't even know what the 4 units would, there would have.
That's just a follow-up question to water, sewer, or Connie. What are the 4 units? And is that in fact accurate? It may be a holdover from the school.
It's probably
which was not
estimated.
here.
Probably is.
I think it probably is.
In which case it would be 3 units and the rate would go down based on number of units.
And the 3rd unit would be MMCTV.
I don't know.
Well, it's
It
gonna
would
be,
probably-
MFCTV doesn't have water in there, it's the kitchen
No, yeah, it was probably the school,
and the bathroom.
the town, radiate, and then post office.
I don't even want to.
Potentially, it could have been that. We should find out.
And then we should then affirmatively determine what's the correct number of units, whether it's 4 or less.
I think that's fair.
Okay, so
Okay, so the motion made by David, seconded by Jeff, is to approve all the warrants except for the one for MSK engineers, which should be sent back to the water and sewer department. If we're ready, please state your name and your vote.
it's Jeff, aye.
Aye. David, aye. Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, items for the next agenda. Next agenda, would be for the meeting, the first meeting in November.
Right.
One item that Jeff and I were gonna try to work on maybe next week is charitable social service donations, and that appears to have become more complex than I thought it would be at first glance, having looked at a VLCT policy. So that I think it's an agenda item. It may or may not be ready, and Josh J probably merits other conversation between now and then.
Based on what you said to me coming in, I think you're right.
And I think what we committed to is to make sure that we had something for you for the next budget meeting in mid-November, but we may be able to get an update.
So that's fine.
What else do we? I'm brain dead. I can't figure out what we did.
Is there any follow-up on our favorite speed sign topic?
It would be nice. I mean, that can certainly be a topic.
Maybe, why don't we give him a little bit of time and he can come back to us when he has something to report.
Well, we don't want we don't want to let it sit out there forever, but I mean, Duncan does have a lot going on. This is an unusual thing to stick somebody with. Although I think we could definitely buy a ladder. Or find a ladder.
I actually, you know what, I'll help in the speed signs, but I need somebody to tell me what to do.
I think it's a matter, like, again, like I said, I think it's, once we get the ladder and get in there, what do we do?
That's the next.
Well, right, the one that we especially need a ladder
We
for.
don't know what each needs, I think.
I've been in the one that we need a ladder for up in Jericho Road. It is not the same make as the others. When you open it, there's just a battery in there.
Like there
There's no
is
control panel.
two or three guys.
So that's where I think it's more than just.
Where's that list of the signs? Where?
Anyhow, if no one else has anything else right now, you know how to reach Josh.
Yeah.
We'll add 100 things between now and 3 weeks from now. No problem.
So our plan to annex Quebec, you know. Okay, I'm looking for motion to adjourn.
This is Davidson. Got it. Bart, I'll second that.
Motion from David Sanders, seconded by Bart Hill to adjourn. Any discussion? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
Yeah, Lisa, I.
David, I.
Bart, I.
And Jay, aye.
Signatures.
We are done except for signing things.